Mic check, mic check. Mic check, test.
All right, welcome back to the September 14th public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We are beginning our afternoon session with public hearing item number 4. And this is a hearing where the public and applicants may participate remotely. So we will be reviewing applications by applicants either here or remote. And we will be taking public testimony from people in the room first, and then we'll see if there's any public who are participating remotely, and we'll take testimony from those people after we hear from the people in the room. So with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala, to take us through the afternoon session.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And we're actually going to do items 4 and 5 together as one presentation here. So I'll read those both in. Item 4, LPC 22-01476, an application for a certificate of appropriateness number of Manhattan, block 1273, lot 33, 744 Fifth Avenue, aka 754 Fifth Avenue and 2 West 58th Street, Bergdorf Goodman individual landmark. It's a modern classical style department store designed by Buckman Khan and built in 1927 and 28 with later alterations. Application is to install signage and modify storefront infill. Also, item 5, LPC 22-01475. This has identical property information as to what I just read. This application is to establish a master plan for the installation of seasonal displays.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Sarah Ripple with Higgins, Quaysbarth and Partners. I'm joined by some of my teammates via Zoom, Steve Segura and Laura Reinhardt from Design Republic, and Sarah Avedimento from Van Cleef & Arpels. Sorry, just waiting for the lag. There we go. Okay. This is 744 Fifth Avenue, part of the larger Bergdorf Goodman landmark. It's located on the west side of Fifth Avenue between 57th and 58th Streets. Our area of scope is limited to the East 57th Street corner shown in this lower left photo, which comprises approximately 35 feet of frontage out of 200 on Fifth Avenue and about 20 feet out of 125 feet on 57th. As Corey noted, this presentation includes 2 separate applications, but we're presenting them together. The first is for minor storefront modifications, including relocating the signage on both elevations from its current location to a lower course above the windows and installing a stone veneer at the base of the storefront windows. The second application that we'll get to is, as he mentioned, a master plan for temporary installations. This master plan will be in front of you for review because staff has already issued 2 permits for temporary art installations at Van Cleef since last fall, and there is a desire for future installations.
So Sarah, if you could just click on the screen and then try to advance.
Sarah, use the click on the screen at your desktop and then use the arrow keys to advance.
Okay. It's asking for your login. So as some of you may remember, when my next slide comes up, the building is an individual landmark designated in 2016, designed by Eli Jacques Kahn. In the modern,
you still do need to click on the screen itself to activate that window. So you just click on the slide and then you'll be able to advance. That's working now.
That's the next one. Okay, thank you. Going too far. Okay. Designed by Eli Jacquin in the modern classical style and built in 1927, it is significant for its historic association with Bergdorf Goodman, which continues to occupy the building today, except for the southeast corner, which is leased by Van Cleef, as well as for its role in the commercial development of Fifth Avenue. The ground floor has undergone many generations of change, starting very shortly after completion, as you may note in the upper two photos, while the upper floors remain largely intact. The building historically featured a variety of storefront types, a characteristic which continues to this day. You'll notice in the upper right photo, Van Cleef has occupied storefronts at this building since as early as 1940, essentially for the full life of the building thus far. First at that retail space before moving to the south at the corner where it currently is. Okay. As mentioned, this is a very large building with 3 facades with storefronts and entries, approximately 460 feet of frontage. And a variety of storefront infill exists today, as did historically, including marble-clad storefronts immediately adjacent, the Van Cleef storefront on 57th. Almost all of the first floor has been rebuilt over time, much of the South Dover white marble replaced, and much of the detailing dating to a significant 1984 alteration. In short, there's very little original fabric remaining at the ground floor. Signage has also manifested in different ways across the facades, including pin-mounted lettering. So looking more closely at our area of work, we see those changes over time for our specific bays. In 1931, we have the original window configuration. Not 10 years later, the windows have been enlarged and altered. By 1970, the existing windows were constructed. And then in 2016, at designation, the textured brass panels were in place within the windows and temporary brass finishes were at the base of the windows. Those have since been removed. Van Cleef, which has occupied the building since early days, has historically utilized these windows with built-in vitrines, which continues today to create a kind of jewel box display, often with the surrounding glazing blacked out to highlight the display. Signage has also changed over time, and we see it in different locations and configurations, including in 2012, positioned over the windows, which is the location the current proposal intends to reestablish. Without an opaque finish at the base of the vitrines that we saw in historic photos, the current condition is vision glass, which has resulted in an unsatisfying condition where you can see within that interstitial space and leaves a less refined exterior finish. As noted, as recent as 2012, we had pin-mounted signage above the windows. Our proposal is to install signage in those locations. We'll be working with the signage contractor to utilize the existing penetrations and limit new penetrations. Okay, so in elevation, the existing signage is 17 inches tall and a little over 14 feet in length on Fifth Avenue. And the proposed signage is reduced in size to 13.5 inches tall. The penetrations from the existing signage will be patched using a marble restoration mortar, a yawn mortar or equivalent. And you see the 3 locations where the stone is proposed at the base of the windows. And on 57th Street, the existing 17-inch letters replaced with 13.5-inch tall letters to match Fifth Avenue and lowered a course from this course down to this one. So our signage details, we're looking at a 1.5-inch thick metal channel letter with halo lighting. The conduit will be threaded through one of the penetrations. And in section at the storefront, we have existing on the left and proposed on the right. We see the proposed composition at the storefront window. The stone and honeycomb veneer will be 1 1/8 inch thick, adhered to the existing glazing, leaving a 1/4 inch reveal around the perimeter and slightly set back from the face of the storefront framing. This approach, rather than replacing the glazing, requires minimal intervention doesn't impact any historic fabric or the storefront framing, and leaves room for future removal and installation of new glazing without any additional alteration to the surrounding architecture. We got a sample photo of the proposed stone above. The stone was selected for its compatibility and color with the storefront framing, and it has a slight gold veining that is in keeping and complements the other bronze elements at the storefronts. And so here we have the rendered Fifth Avenue condition with our relocated signage from the upper position to above our windows, and the opaque black finish at the base of the vitrines. The location of the signage and the opaque finish, they follow the historic trends that we saw at the storefronts over the course of time, and are keeping with the kind of history of change at the larger building overall. And also, we find that in lowering the signage and minimizing the size, it allows the historic decorative stone to really kind of read as dominant and the signage as secondary. And the stone finish at the storefront sets off the vitrines and provides a more refined condition at the base. A similar use of stone within historic storefronts, there we go, within historic storefront openings is located across the street, just catty corner to Bergdorf at the Sherry Netherland Hotel. Although the larger building is a different use, this is a building with significant frontage that features many retail storefronts at the base and a variety of size and composition and materials. Okay, so our second proposal, I can pause there if you'd like to have questions now.
If there's any questions on the signage, the pin-mounted halo letters that are being reduced and lowered, or the stone within the storefront bulkhead? Okay, I think we're fine. You can move on to the next one.
All right, so our second proposal is a master plan governing future temporary installations at the storefront. Our team has worked with Landmark staff to have 2 temporary art installations approved recently, last fall and this past spring. The motivation for these installations is in part due to impact from COVID as an effort to drive interest in the store, as well as to highlight artist design. These 2 received very positive public response. The one on the right from last fall was a design by Alexander Benjamin Navet, a French artist. The intention is to collaborate with artists in this way on future installations. Van Cleef is planning for another installation this fall, which triggered this requirement for a master plan. The area in the master plan is just the corner of Van Cleef storefronts, as well as the multi-light windows above at the second floor. The master plan is meant to primarily govern the physical attachments to the building, and also provides parameters for time frame and frequency, setting it at 2 times a year for a maximum of 3 months per installation, with staff discretion for longer, and at least 2 months between any 2 installations. So this requires that all framing will be removed between installations and will not remain in place permanently. These temporary installations, whether art installations or decorative, are part of a tradition and history at historic retailers, especially along Fifth Avenue, to enliven the public space. This master plan and these future installations play into and continue that history. So we're showing the area of scope at left, in the left photos. The storefronts have existing anchors at the mortar joints, shown in the photos on the right, that have been used historically for holiday and seasonal decor, such as garland and lights. The previous 2 temporary installations utilized only the existing anchors to mount to the facade, and the master plan will require all future installations to also use only those existing anchors. We will not be adding any more penetrations for the purpose of temporary installations. So the next slide and the couple after that illustrate the attachments and framing system that was previously permitted and which is proposed to be the basis for this master plan. The existing anchor points are noted in red, and then shown in green on the next slide are steel plates mounted to those anchor points that span the arched windows. And then on top of that, in blue is a unistrut system, which is a steel channel frame, will then be attached to those steel plates as the basis base framework for the artwork. The temporary installations will work around the existing storefront configuration and historic elements like the decorative stonework and lamps. The master plan would also allow for vinyl applications at the second floor windows. And here's 57th Street. This is what we had previously approved for the last two installations and has been proven to work without damage to the building. This general attachment and framework system is what we are looking for approval for in the master plan. So the mounting details here show the layers with the applied decoration at the outermost side, the Unistrut in blue beneath, the steel plate beneath that, and then most importantly, a excuse me, a neoprene pad between the installation and the South Dover white marble to protect the stone. Oh, apologies, let me go back. And the detail at the right on that page indicates how the Unistrut will be held off of the building at locations of decorative or projecting stone, leaving a space to provide distance between the installation and the facade. And so here we have some detailed photos of the spring installation showing the composition in 3D of that system, how the weight of the system actually sits on the sidewalk, and how the power that was run to feed the flowers was concealed within painted Unistrut. So much effort went into the structural system to make it as minimal as possible, and even painting it to blend in with the stone. So here's our final result of the spring installation. With the ground floor dimensional art and second floor vinyl at the windows. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. And do we have any questions?
I have one.
Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
The concept of this is to modify the windows, the design of the windows in multiple ways. Is that the concept that you're getting at? What you're trying to do to the windows is modify the design, the shape of the window.
So the first application involves a change to the actual storefront window, which is to put a piece of stone within the storefront framing at the bulkhead. This application is for a framework that would go around the outside on the flat masonry.
So item one, so this framework is to make the window smaller, the glaze area smaller. Is that the intent?
So I'm not sure I understand.
Well, if you go back to the first part, go back to the original facade. Yeah, keep going, keep going. Next one.
Okay.
That one. So the stone panels is the horizontal pieces that go across to make the window smaller. Is that what I'm seeing?
You're asking about the stone panels within the storefront windows?
Yes.
So those stone panels will be mounted within this center portion below the existing vitrines.
Could you just explain the purpose of that again? I think he's asking.
Oh, sure. Yes. Sorry, I missed that part. So the existing condition is clear vision glass, and there's an existing vitrine built in at the interior. It's built-in millwork, and this has created a kind of unpleasant condition where you actually see that space in between the glass and the millwork, and it's there's no kind of built-in room for cleaning and whatnot. And then, kind of on top of that, the finish at the aesthetic finish at the exterior just has a little bit of a less finished quality. The desire is to kind of conceal that interstitial space and also to provide a kind of finer level of material at the exterior.
Yes, Commissioner Gustafson.
So the existing condition is a glass frame, right, surrounding a glass vitrine, right?
Yes.
And the proposed condition is a solid frame, eliminating the glass on the outside, right, and leaving the vitrine in the middle, same size vitrine.
Right, exactly. So the vitrine will remain here at the interior. It's built in at the inside. And then the stone veneer will actually be applied to the existing glazing at the exterior.
So it conceals that interstitial space on the inside.
They want to get the depth.
It's, I think you said it was 1 1/8
1 and
inches,
yes, 1 1/8 inch thick.
and there is a gap around it.
That's
right?
correct. There's a 1/4 inch reveal around the exterior of the panel to leave some space between it and the frame. Sorry, I'm just going back very slowly. And then it's not yet flush with the plane. It's the plane of this.
Actually, Sarah,
the framing
go
is-
forward one photo, go back
Okay.
to where you were.
It's
So
still set back from the face of the storefront frame.
just go one more, there.
This one.
So in that area below the vitrine, see the blue vitrine in the center panel, there's sort of green glass, is that what that is?
Yes, it's just regular vision glass and there's a, painted plaster partition essentially behind it. That's part of the vitrine, the built-in vitrine. And so it's reading as glazing in front of a wall. That's right.
Right, so to conceal the fact that there's partition behind it, they want to make that not transparent. Other questions? All right, let's go to public testimony and we may have questions after that. All right, so again, we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance. And so we're going to start with Simeon Bankoff.
All right, then. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Simeon Bankoff, Executive Director of the Historic Districts Council. The historic images of this building show the elegance of its design. It is a remarkable piece of architecture and a rare example of a standalone modern commercial building, which we don't have a lot of in New York City. With this in mind, HDC strongly objects to the premise behind this application. This proposal seeks to use this attractive minimalist building as an easel for signage rather than as a frame. The specifics of the attachments appear to be well thought out and minimally damaging to the physical integrity of the building, but the end result of an approval will cover this landmark in colorful drapery 6 months out of the year. It's one thing to dress up for the holidays, but at a certain point, and this application reaches it, one is wearing Christmas sweaters all year round, and that's a definite fashion statement which changes your whole look. When you have as good a look as this building does, that's just gilding the lily.
All right, thank you. All right, and then we have Theodore Grunwald.
Theodore Greenwald, good afternoon. There has been an intentional attempt to blur regulatory and philosophical distinctions as to whether the floral installation is art. It's not. It's advertising. As blatant as a billboard, or the vinyl wraps that periodically appear and disappear on the gymnasium at the corner of Greenwich Avenue and West 12th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District, earning it repeated violations from the Landmark Commission's Enforcement Department. Driving this distinction further, one need only look a few blocks north to the great René Lalique cast glass windows with its floral motifs on the Coty building to understand how great this yawning distinction between art and advertising is, particularly as one compares the floral motifs on the second floor of this proposal. Among the worst aspects of the circus of real estate speculation we now live in, which residents and visitors comment upon again and again, is the permanence of building scaffolding, the oldest of which are approaching the quarter-century mark of obscuring our city's architecture. Permanent scaffolding is an analogous example of Christabel Goff's key point that this landmark could be permanently hidden by a temporary series of consecutive seasonal installations. It's a lousy precedent. Now you see it, now you don't. This application must be denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Please, Christabel Goff. Sorry? Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Christabel Goff for the Society for the Architecture of the City. And perhaps before I start, I should say when you have combined two items, I'm sure you don't intend to cut the public comment period of 3.5 minutes and give 1.5 minutes for each item. So I may run slightly over 3 minutes. This is an extraordinary proposal. If built, it would obliterate the architectural design of this individual landmark and introduce a very damaging precedent for Fifth Avenue. The area of the facade that would be appropriated is exponentially larger and more prominently placed than any advertising sign that this commission has ever approved. Understanding that there may be a contention that this is a work of art, nevertheless, the design intent seems not to be primarily aesthetic. Utterly incompatible stylistically with its immediate background and its surroundings, the installation is there to attract attention and engage potential customers, boldly advertising the presence of Bergdorf Goodman. The applicants have the unregulated option of placing their floral artifacts in the many large display windows, which they acknowledge as a possibility since this is the treatment proposed for the second floor. The facade needs to retain its architectural character, which is really unaffected by the minor changes that have been made with your approval. And also it's standing as an individual landmark at a major crossroads of the city. It would have been helpful if the scope and wording of the master plan had been revealed to the public before the hearing. If this master plan is similar to others, it may authorize staff level approvals for a sequence of different designs. And I modified my prepared testimony slightly because of the clarification that came during the hearing. However, especially given the quality and character of this proposal, it would be unthinkable and a departure from accepted practice to give a blind blanket approval to a whole series of installations of such scale, materials, illumination, three-dimensionality, and potential unpredictability to be applied repeatedly to the facade of a prominent landmark. To quote your statement of regulatory intent, creative displays have traditionally included temporary lighting and decorations across the facades, and the intent of designation would be to allow continued installations, and we have no quarrel with that. However, while this agreement anticipates decorations generally, it does not mandate approval of any specific decoration. We are reminded of the late Jean Norman, who, presiding, heard an application to modernize a facade by hiding its ornament behind a large placard, which, it was said, would not damage protected features. Norman rejoined that the purpose of the landmarks law is not only to preserve protected features, it is to allow the people of the city to enjoy them, which is only possible when they can see them. The present application, calendared as Form 5, appear to be in danger of failing that test, and neither is acceptable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? All right, and I just would like to, for any members of the public who are participating remotely, if you would like to speak on this item, we don't have anyone who signed up, but if you would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand, the button at the bottom of your screen. All right, and Lisa and Sasha, do we see any hands? Okay, so it seems we don't have anyone else who wishes to speak. So Sarah, would you like to respond to the comments we've heard?
Yes, thank you. On a couple of points. So I just want to clarify and be clear that this is a master plan for temporary installations, and that the basis of the master plan is for any potential installations that come forward in the future, what that physical attachment and what the impact or lack thereof on the building would be. This is not a master plan that lays out a consistent timeline for 2 installations every year forever. It's a master plan that governs the installations as they come out to ensure that they meet the requirements of staff and the commission.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
Just to follow up on that. So let's say that you're approved, or your client is approved on installing the framing shown on the renderings or shown in the elevations. Do you envision a process whereby the framing is approved under the master plan, but the artwork is then reviewed individually by the staff? Is that the scenario that we're talking about here?
It is anticipated that, as we would for other temporary installations on other buildings, that the submission package would include information on what's going up. So it'll be the physical installation and some information on what that artistic installation is.
So the staff would still have the capacity to review the artwork proposed and judge whether it's artwork or really big letters that say, sale on diamonds.
No,
I don't think that's what she said.
we don't.
right?
We don't regulate the whether it's art or not. That's not what's before us. It's we would be looking at what is being planned to be put on the armature. And so, like the
Right.
seasonal installations, where we've done master plans for seasonal installations, we will have approved the basic location and the attachment type. And then we don't say whether it has to be one seasonal reference or another, then they can put up whichever.
The thing I'm thinking,
Iconography.
the thing that comes to mind is that restaurant on 7th Avenue South in Greenwich Village, where the guy wanted to make art on the entrance that happened to be in the name of his restaurant. And, thereby circumventing the sign regulations and asking us to approve it as art. And that's different because it's not seasonal, it's permanent. But I mean, if this is being requested as an approval for an armature for artwork, then what happens if the staff says, you know what? This ain't artwork, this is, they don't do that. So basically, whatever goes up there is okay automatically because we don't look at content.
We don't look at content, but more specifically, this is not an application for art for our purposes, right? So we've calendared as an installation of seasonal displays.
Seasonal displays, which could be theoretically, discount on watches.
Right, so words as opposed to imagery.
I mean, I think the intent here is that there's not going to be, it's not words, as I understand, it's mostly design and other things like this. So that's the intent. And if we need to be more specific about sort of what you all would like us to be looking at, we can work with the applicant to come up with more specific things. But the idea is, for example, as the staff comments reflect, the idea would be to try to limit the displays to within the framework, not let it go above or beyond, that sort of thing. Primarily with the idea that they're only going to be up there for 2 months and that'll be the end of it. And they're really deemed to be displays as opposed to advertising. So that's really the goal.
And our question is not to think about whether this is art or not. I think it's a display. I think it's represented as imagery. should it be something that's all signage, we would have to then consider whether it's in compliance with the master plan.
Right, so that, it was one of my other points from testimony that I wanted to clarify. This is not going to be signage. It is intended to be artwork. It's supposed to be, a decorative installation. There is no intent to, put large lettering up on, on this framework. It's a purely artistic installation. And as Sarah mentioned, it's up for, 2 months, 3 months at a time. And the master plan is really meant to establish the appropriateness or the appropriate way to attach to the building, reminding ourselves that this is, holding itself off of the facade, attaching to existing anchorages, that once it comes down, the building is there. We're not making any physical permanent alterations to the building. It's just to establish the rules by which any potential future installations would be installed, and purely as an artistic installation, not signage and advertising.
Right. And so we should think of it as decorative or imagery versus letters.
Right.
And just I also need to note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 5 recommended approval of the application as presented. Commissioner Gustafson and then Commissioner Jefferson.
I keep hearing the word seasonal, but does the master plan include specific timing limits? I mean, we heard testimony suggest that, for example, we could be wrapping the building for 6 months out of a year. What are the specifics? And I heard you say 2 or 3 months. What are the specifics? What are the limitations?
Sure. So the written parameters for the time frame at this point are installation for a maximum of 3 months, with potential staff discretion if there's a request for longer, but a maximum of 3 months, 2 times a year, with at least 2 months in between each installation, so that the framework comes down in between the installations. The framework will not stay up permanently. It only goes up when there's an artistic installation. It's not a permanent installation on the building. And
okay, so you don't disagree with the testimony that the building could be wrapped in 6 months, for 6 months out of the year?
6 months out of the year, not 6.
No, you don't disagree with that, right?
not at the maximum of the parameters right now. That is
But not to
maximum
be
3
clear,
months
not
of time.
consecutive, not consecutively.
Right, but it could be
Right.
6 months out of every year.
Right.
Right, okay, got it, thank you.
And as a reminder, this is just the corner storefronts for Van Cleef. It's 2 storefronts at the corner on Fifth Avenue and the 1 window on 57th Street. It's a very small portion of the overall building, and it's just at the ground floor, not even, covering up at the 2nd floor. There's an allowance for vinyl at the windows, but it's really limited in its expanse. Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Devonshire.
Yeah, but I guess I have a question for Mark. That said, are we not opening a possible floodgate for the other retailers on that building, on this individual landmark, to come before us wanting to do the same thing, not necessarily at the same time, so that this individual landmark is covered 12 months out of the year with stuff?
Right. So I wouldn't consider it a floodgate because any other application would come to us, and at any point we could say there's a cumulative effect.
But
So we would.
then these people could get up here and say, well, you let it happen in the past.
Right,
which
and
is
we could
something that was
say-
mentioned this morning, the precedents that we have set
Right.
by allowing things
Right,
at the RCA building.
Sure, but anytime that we look at the whole building, we look at the signage elsewhere on the building as well as what's being proposed to understand the cumulative effect. And if the proposed signage, in addition with existing signage, has an overwhelming effect, we have said no to that. So we will
Right, and-
review any other applications.
Right. I mean,
But yes, I mean, it is a reason someone else might come in.
right, so, and just to add one more thought to that, I think Sarah said it exactly right. But it's also, this is a little bit of a different situation because this is something that pre-existed the designation, the sort of, the use of this very whole system was in place. And I think that helps sort of set it apart.
All right, and Commissioner Jefferson, I'm so sorry, you were supposed to go.
My question is, the specific art typically have its own structure. Are we putting up a general structure for any piece of art?
Yes, for the, whatever the imagery is, that may change. It's for
But the
the
structure is for-
application before us is for the framework to support the
It's not a
imagery.
specific piece of artwork that's going up each time that the structure should change. That way, it's not living there forever. It's changeable. But in this case, it's always there. And you always have the same piece or something that works within that system. And I'm wondering, is it better that each art have its own structure so that we don't have this replication of the same?
Right, so I
That's a
think
question.
the question is, should or would the framework be changed to work with the imagery for the different installations? And I think, because here we see almost this, dense lattice, which is different than the framework you're proposing. So maybe you could speak to how visible the framework is, how dense it is, or how thick it is, and whether it's should be considered as a design component.
So, I'm sorry, I can't go back anymore. So you're asking about the actual structural installation and attachment. I don't know who's controlling it anymore. If we could go back to the elevation that shows the installation and the different color codes.
You still have control of the screen, so you can just click on it and then advance.
It's asking for Corey's login again. But in general, the framework is very slender. The framework will be limited based on where those existing anchorages are. Thank you, Corey. So, as I mentioned, we're not adding additional anchor points. So the potential for the framework itself isn't going to be, expanding to cover more because it's limited to where we can currently attach. So sorry, I'm just trying to get back to our elevation here. So the system includes the potential for some slender steel plates that span the arch of the window and help. It includes some steel plates that span the arch of the window and help carry the load down to the sidewalk. And as I mentioned, the sidewalk carries much of the load, so that this isn't a structural system that has to be beefed up, per installation. We are looking for approval for the frame system that we've had approved previously, which is that steel unistrut, the steel channel. I'm sorry. Getting there slowly. Well, actually, I can stay on that image. So in the image on the left, I think that's a better representation of what the actual channel system is. It's hard to see them, in fact, because they've been painted to blend in with the stone behind. But there's, a slender channel here, and there's some horizontals. On the Fifth Avenue side, there's some steel framing, like I said, that is in between the anchors and the unistrut system that spans the arches of the windows. But it's quite minimal. It's quite slender, and it's not going to be growing.
Okay, so unlike the image on the right, the framework is not intended to be part of the decoration. And so it's more like the image on the left. It's thin framing that are not dense at all and are painted out to match the stone. So I think you're not supposed to read the framing. You're just supposed to read the imagery on it, as I understand it.
That's correct. The framework is meant to blend in and not be a part of the installation.
it becomes part of the facade forever.
Well, no, it comes
No.
on and off.
No.
There are existing attachments that have
So
been
they
in
take it off
place.
and they put it back on. And they-
Yeah. And those attachments have been in place since prior to designation. And so this would just be using those attachments. They would not install any other attachments.
That's right. That's right. Yes, it'll come down in between each installation. The framework is not a permanent installation at the building.
Other questions? All right. And Sarah, was there any final comment you wanted to make before we move to our discussion? Any other final comment?
No, I think that covered it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, great. So we'll have a motion to close the hearing. Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
Okay, on the, I guess on the application, first application, right? Which is the signage and the storefront infill. I think the change in the signage is actually an improvement. Not separating the two parts of the sign, which could have some absurdity to it. And even though we're doubling up on it, we'll make it smaller, lower. I think that's fine. I'm not disturbed by the change in the panel, I guess, from glass to that doesn't really bother me. On the second application, I am very concerned about this. What I guess I'll refer to as the Christmas sweater problem. If the Christmas sweater is worn for seasonal, to me, is a month before Christmas. Seasonal for whatever it is, but 6 months out of the year, and you know that if that's the maximum, that will become the actual. That's all there is to it. And so I don't mind the idea of the framework in the way they did it. I understand it's not doing any damage, but in terms of hiding the facade of the building, and I don't, the proportion of how much you're doing is really, it's irrelevant, right? I mean, it's the most prominent place in the entire building. So I can't approve it for the time period.
Okay, so conceptually, a temporary installation like this could be fine if it were a shorter period of time.
Absolutely.
Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yes, I agree with the signage. I think it is an improvement and it's appropriate. I don't agree on the installation of the granite on top of the glass vitrine. I think that they're trying to limit the visibility inside the vitrine. They can put a film inside the glass, but I think the reading of the glass is on the same plane is important. I think that, again, the concept of the seasonal display is acceptable, but I agree that the time frame is extreme. And I think I would propose that perhaps a 1 month maximum for each display. I think that we'll have to go around the table to see what everyone agrees on.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay. In terms of the signage, I think it's fine. I think it's appropriate. In terms of the infill, I agree with Anne in terms of, I think her solution is a better one, but I don't oppose what they've done. I think it's weird. I think it's unusual in that it's padded out, but then has a reveal around it, unlike the Sherry Netherland where the stone is set into the frame. But again, I don't think it's inappropriate. Storefronts change a lot, and this will change in 10 minutes too. In terms of the temporary display armature, I think that one of the problems with with the presentation is that the presentation that we're seeing doesn't really reflect the signage that they're proposing, which is actually going to be in this course, one course lower than it is now. So in essence, the armature could provide I guess, a mechanism to kind of cover over their own signage, which I guess that's their business if they want to do it, but I would suggest that it should be maybe one course lower. And I think that we should look at this. I think I agree totally with John and with Ann in terms of the limitations. I'm not sure if a month is the period. I think that it should follow whatever other city guidelines may exist related to seasonal displays. Seasonal displays, generally, in my limited understanding of these things, tends to mean Thanksgiving to Christmas and maybe till New Year's, and I think that's probably about right. I don't recall there being a major movement of decorative signage related to 4th of July or Memorial Day on Fifth Avenue as a traditional thing. So I'd say once a year on Christmas, Thanksgiving to Christmas, and call it a day. And I think also we should put in guidelines that indicate that it is intended, as the applicant stated, to be artistic, and that the art itself should seek to engage with and not obscure the architecture. I think that the flower example that they showed, for instance, was more or less transparent and it interacted with the architecture. I think that the trellis tended to kind of overwhelm it and hide it. So I think that the staff should work with the applicant to develop standards that would keep the emphasis on the building and not on the artwork itself.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
Yes, with regard to the artwork, I agree with everything that Michael said, and I think it should be 2 months out of the year, November and December. There's no other holiday that requires art/advertising like that. I'm okay with the signage change, and I'm okay with the stone assembly in the windows simply because it's also reversible.
Thank you. Commissioner Chin.
Yeah, I think I agree that the signage and the stone is appropriate. Just to be consistent, I think this is what the commissioners are asking. I think the clarification needs to be consistent with the city standard. I do know that, for example, DOT and other agencies do allow 30 days because you take Little Italy, they rotate their lighting seasonally, so to speak, because the streets are rather dark. So rather than we sticking our own unique standard, I think should be consistent with the city standard. I do know that, we have beyond Christmas, because in Chinatown, for example, we have Lunar New Year. And then the other places, Little Italy do have special lighting after holiday for their spring season and that type of thing. And I do know that they do rotate their permits. So I just want to be consistent.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Brand.
I'm okay with the signage and the storefront. And I think what I've been hearing other commissioners say, I think I agree with. There needs to be a more definitive time set for how long this seasonal display can be up. And maybe I missed it, but I mean, a couple of shots of Cartier, for instance, and a few other of the buildings. Do they all have, I mean, these are landmarks. Do they also have our approval, and do they need it?
They do have our approval for seasonal installations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I think it should be consistent with what we do there.
Right. I mean, okay. Commissioner Lutfi.
Okay, so I agree with a little bit of everything. Maybe everything, but to a different degree. So I think the new signage is great. It works well. It's much better, as we've heard. I don't mind the idea of having something at the bottom of the building, but I think I happen to agree with Anne that I think it should be very understated. It shouldn't be dark in any way. I don't think it should compete with the building in any way. So it should be lighter or some kind of glazing or film, something. It could even be stone, but then I think it just needs to be soft, but that wouldn't be my first choice. In terms of the artwork, I agree that it shouldn't compete with any important architectural, the framing shouldn't compete, nor should the artwork with any of the important architectural features of the building, and that there should be a clearly delineated time frame. I'm not convinced it should be around the holidays because this is art. It's not necessarily Christmas decorations. So, you know, and in fact, I think it's better if it's broken up, in two different halves of the year so that we have some breather. I would say also, because it is art, you want to give it a little bit of time. So I think a month might be too little. And maybe 2 months would be the absolute maximum. 2 months and a couple times, still 2 times a year, 2 times a year. Okay. All right, Commissioner Jefferson.
I think this is a very strong building and it can absorb some art, and as we call installation art. And I agree with art design, I think, but the art piece, all I ask for that is to be balanced with the building so that one doesn't dominate the other, or it's just a matter of taste, how it works out. But I think what they have is fine, and I agree with what they have.
Okay, so, but you think that there should be,
But there should be, it's a matter of balance, right? The installation should not be dominant over the building, but it should balance with it, and a time frame would be a good idea
okay,
for each one.
okay. All right, I think we've made it all the way around. All right, so I think. All right, so I think we actually, I know Commissioner Holford Smith and Commissioner Lutfi had concerns about the stone panel, but I think we actually have 6 commissioners who would support the first application. So I think we can move ahead with an action on the first application. With the second application, we've had a lot of discussion about timing and other kind of standards. And I just wonder, I think we've heard everything from 30 days to 2 months or follow other holidays. And I think it is hard to think about other holidays because I don't think there is a set citywide standard. There are sort of the holidays between November and December and January, but then there are other holidays in other neighborhoods, and I think that they vary. And I think that Commissioner Lutfi, your point is interesting, that these aren't actually about a holiday. They're sort of meant to be expressions that are outside of particular holidays. And so I just wonder with that, I'm not sure we'll ever find a citywide consistent date, but I'm just wondering if we were to take an action that imposed standards about lowering the armature and that the intent of the imagery is to, and we can even use your language, to seek to engage and not obscure the architecture, and then limit the time frame to 2 months, 2 times a year. Would people be comfortable with that? Okay, all right, so let's do that. So Commissioner Gustafson, the first one will be easier. The second one, 2 months, twice a year, not to be consecutive.
4 months total.
And recommend that the armature be lowered by a stone course and that the decoration seek to engage and not obscure the architecture. Yes.
If you're not in consensus with that, you should read it.
If you actually don't agree with that, we can have someone else read that one.
Yeah, why don't we have someone else read that?
Okay,
one,
we'll have
just
that.
to get the
Michael,
rest of
will
the
you do that one?
conversation.
Okay.
So, in the matter of LPC 22-01476, 744 Fifth Avenue, also known as 754 Fifth Avenue, 2 West 58th Street, Bergdorf Goodman individual landmark. The application is to install signage and modify storefront infill. With regard to the signage, I recommend approval, finding that the proposed building mounted signage featuring pin mounted metal letters with halo lighting is harmonious with the type, material, finish, and halo illumination of signs at other locations throughout the base of the building. That the location of signage at this corner and at the building overall has changed over time. Therefore, the proposed signage location will be consistent with prior sign placement and will still align with the mounting height of other signs at the base of the building. That there are numerous penetrations throughout the marble facade from previous sign installations, some of which will be used by the new signage, and the conduit for the halo lighting will be concealed and run through the same penetration as the letter attachment, thereby limiting the number of new penetrations into the facade. And that the proposed pin-mounted metal letters are well scaled to the building and will not obscure or detract from the decorative architectural features above the Fifth Avenue entrance. With regard to the modifications to storefront infill, I recommend approval. That the shape and size of storefront openings and configuration of infill at this corner of the building have been significantly modified multiple times over the building's history. Therefore, the proposed installation of a solid panel at the storefront infill will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features. That the installation will not require modification of any storefront framing, will be easily reversible, and will not preclude increased transparency at these display windows in the future. And that the installation of interior vitrines and displays resulting in reduced transparency at the ground floor storefront is a typical feature at the base of this building and at other similar large department store buildings.
And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion? All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland. Aye. Commissioner Chen. Aye. Commissioner Devonshire. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum. Aye. Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson. Aye. Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you make the second motion?
Sure. Regarding 744 Fifth Avenue, also known as 754 Fifth Avenue, 2 West 58th Street, the Bergdorf Goodman building, the individual landmark, the application is to establish a master plan for the installation of seasonal displays. I recommend approval of modifications, finding that the proposed installations are temporary, will feature padded systems of structural supports to protect the underlying marble facade. Will be attached to the facade only through existing anchor points and will use existing conduit penetrations for illumination, reducing damage to historic fabric of the existing anchor points, conduit penetrations, and padded structural system that is installed prior to the designation of the landmark. But the second floor windows are visually tied to the ground floor through the treatment of the building base, and the proposed vinyl decals at the windows and frames will be reversible. Therefore, incorporating these windows into the displays will continue to reinforce the building base as separate from the upper floors without causing damage to the historic fabric. The proposed master plan will display timeframes and require a minimum period between each installation during which all components of the display will be removed and the facade exposed. And the use of bold seasonal illuminated displays is consistent with similar temporary and seasonal installations to other large department stores and commercial buildings, particularly those located within the Fifth Avenue corridor. Special architectural and historic character of the individual landmark. However, the applicant I recommend that the applicant modify the proposal in the following ways. First, that the armature be lowered one course to coordinate with the lowered signage. Second, that the staff work with the applicant to ensure that all proposed art installations are deferent to and not obscuring of the architecture, its details, and its general character. And that the timeframe for displays be limited to 4 months total over the course of a year with a maximum of 2 periods of 2 months each, separated by a period of time at least 2 months long.
Okay, that sounds good. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that?
I second it.
Thank you. Mark?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland. Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Nay.
Commissioner Jefferson. Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
So that's approved with those modifications. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
The next item is item number 6, LPC 21-06057. For a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 44, Lot 24, 495 Broadway in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. Suppose our style store and lock building designed by Alfred Zucker and built in 1892 to 93. The application is to construct rooftop bulkheads and railings, and the presenter will be joining us remotely today. Rick, you may begin.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, good afternoon. Rick Azar for 495 Broadway, an 8-story brick and masonry Art Nouveau style commercial building located in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. 495 Broadway is a through-the-block building with its main entrance located on the west side of Broadway. On the west side of Broadway, with an additional street facade on the east side of Mercer Street at number 66. Proposed are a new roof deck, a new glass windscreen, and new and modified elevator and stair bulkheads that will provide outdoor rooftop accessory use for the exclusive benefit of the building's commercial tenants and their guests.
Rick, there's a bit of delay between slides, so when you advance, just give it a couple of seconds.
Thank you, Corey. On page A100, we have an axiometric study of the bulkhead volume new and increased proposed. On the left at detail 1, the existing condition of the roof. Here we see an existing Broadway side passenger elevator bulkhead, an existing fire stair B bulkhead, an existing skylight, existing fire stair A closer to Mercer Street, and on the Mercer Street side of the building, an existing service bulkhead, and at the northwest corner, an elevator bulkhead. On the right in detail 2, shaded areas indicate new and expanded accretions. At the left, the shaded area shows the vertical expansion proposed to the passenger elevator that will allow a stop on the roof and bring fire stair B up to code. Continuing right, fully shaded blocks show a new mechanical room and a new electrical generator room. At fire stair A, the shaded area shows vertical expansion proposed that will bring the stair to code, as well as expansion proposed for the Mercer Street side elevator that will provide a stop at roof level. On page A101, existing and proposed conditions are shown in plan. In addition to the rooftop bulkhead, In addition to the rooftop bulkhead work already described, we can see the roof deck proposed on the Broadway side, an upper deck, at the center and towards Mercer Street, a lower deck, and along the bottom of the proposed rooftop plan, this is the north lot line parapet. There will be a 60-inch high windscreen, which will run all along this north lot line parapet. The glass screen will be treated with a non-reflective coating on both sides. Page A102 provides an existing satellite view of the rooftop along a northeast to southwest axis. Page A102 provides an existing satellite view of the rooftop. Page 103 provides a proposed condition rendering. Vertically modified Broadway passenger elevator and fire stair B, a new mechanical room, a new electric generator room, a modified stair A, and this is closer to Mercer Street, and at the Mercer Street elevator bulkhead, new construction within existing masonry walls set at 90 degrees. My apologies, the next two pages are misnumbered. But essentially, we have here an existing satellite view along a reverse axis. And here we have a proposed, and here we have a proposed look rendering. And I draw to your attention the Mercer Street elevator bulkhead, the new construction set within existing masonry walls set at 90 degrees. Color-coded axiometric renderings offer an additional perspective. Page 106 is a rendering of an axiometric bird's eye view facing southwest. On the left, the existing condition at the rooftop. To the right, the proposed view. We can see in the green the expansion and height proposed at the passenger elevator bulkhead, approximately 11 feet, for a total of 22 feet. Fire stair B, immediately to the right, will be expanded vertically 5 feet for a total of 14 feet in height. The new mechanical room, the new electrical generator room, both 14 feet high. Fire stair A, closer to the Mercer Street elevation, an additional 5 feet for a total height of 14 feet, and a 5-foot bulkhead expansion at the Mercer Street elevator bulkhead that will provide a stop on the rooftop. This bulkhead will fit within the existing brick parapet walls. Also shown in the proposed along the north lot line is the windscreen proposed. Okay, these pages show the same information along different axes. Here on page 108, facing northeast, and here on 109 facing northwest. Page A10 is a proposed material page. The elevator bulkheads will be constructed out of full brick so as to better integrate the work into existing background masonry. As is required for a project of this stature, mock-ups were done and visibility studies conducted along Broadway and Mercer Street, the results of which showed as visible from public venue portions of the elevator bulkhead expansion proposed for the Broadway side and the Mercer Street side. Two mock-up photos that show maximum mock-up visibility were chosen, one from the Broadway study, one from the Mercer Street study, and the proposed work rendered into the photos. On this particular page, page A111, we have on the left the Broadway visibility mock-up photograph, and on the right, the rendering of the work in place. Here on page A112 is the Mercer Street visibility mock-up photograph on the left, and on the right, the rendering into this photograph. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Questions, commissioners? Okay, let's take public testimony and then we will have questions after that. So we have some people who have shown are attending in person to testify and some who are attending remotely. So we will start with the people who are here in person, starting with the people who signed up first and then getting to others, and then we will move to the remote participants. So starting with the people who are in attendance, we will start with Ms. Hans Kung.
Is it working? Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Hans Kung, and I represent the 491 Broadway Co-op. 491 Broadway has been my home for the past 47 years. I have raised 3 daughters with my wife at this location. I'm an active member of the Soho Alliance, which was instrumental in preserving the character of the neighborhood. We, the long-term residents, have made Soho what it is today. In short, I care very deeply about this place that my family has called home for so long. A couple of months ago, we noticed some construction activities on the roof of our direct neighbors to the north, which is the building in question, the New Era building at 495 Broadway. I immediately went over to visit with Robert Weinstein of the WB Group, owners of the building. What he told me, he said, they're trying to accommodate the wishes of some of the tenants to be able to work on the roof while the pandemic is raging. Well, I came across the WB Group's website, and this rendering is posted with the caption, in this COVID-inflicted era, the roof at 495 Broadway will be an oasis in our bustling city, 9,000 square feet of outdoor space with panoramic views. Some workspace. Looks more like a party/event space to us, with large bar, pool, lounges, privacy curtain paths, light projections against the exterior north wall of our building, etc., etc. This meeting is meant to address an application to construct rooftop bulkheads and railings. But what I see in this advertisement is prospective tenants shows the infrastructure of a party spot that will profoundly impact the neighborhood. There's noise from generators, noise from activities on the roof, disco music, drunkenness, light pollution at night, not to mention aesthetically impacted this Art Nouveau gem that is the New Era building. This rooftop renovation, as they call it, will have a tremendously negative impact on our building and the immediate neighborhood. It will visually destroy one of the most beautiful buildings on the Broadway corridor and will degrade the whole area's quality of life. On July 26, 2021, Community Board Member 2 published this statement, quote, CB2 Manhattan recommends denial of this application because the visibility of the elevator extension, the glass barrier, and the decking towards the front of the building do great harm to the historic jewel.
Okay, Mr. Kong, your time has passed, and we do have the the community board resolution, so I'll be noting that for the record. If you'd like to just wrap up now.
Unanimous decision, 37-0. And I hope you can do this, you can come to the same conclusion and deny this project. Thank you for listening to me.
Okay, thank you. All right, and the next person who signed up and is in person is Simeon Bankoff.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Simeon Bankoff, Executive Director of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds the proposed bulkheads on the Mercer Street facade too big and too visible. There must be better ways to create full accessibility to the rooftop without constructing two hulking bulkheads that are right on the street line.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak on this item? All right, not seeing anyone else, we'll move to our remote participants, and I'll turn it over to Anthony Fabre to take us through those who are participating via Zoom.
Thank you, Chair. The first person that I will bring in is Leonard Broner. Lenny, I see you are in the meeting. You should be able to unmute your microphone and turn on your camera if you wish to. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a resident of 491 Broadway, also like Hans is, and I too would like to speak against this. The Mercer side, as we saw in the pictures, is quite visible, the bulkheads there, but the same is true for the Broadway side. I also want to, similarly to Hans' point, to the website, which shows a vastly different space to what was being proposed. If what would be built looks like what gets built on the website, what is on the website, it would be way more visible than the pictures they showed and the studies they showed there, including, of course, the lighting, which, of course, is a completely different problem than the bulkheads themselves. So yeah, I too would like to voice my concerns with what's being proposed here. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to remind others, if you want to testify, please raise your hand even if you've signed up. So the next person that I will bring in for this item is Alan Chasen. It's not allowing me to let him in. Yeah. I'm going to try to bring you in one more time. Okay. Should I allow him to speak? Alan, I'm not able to bring you in, but I will probably be able to allow you to speak. So let me give it a try. So I've asked to unmute you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I'm only attending as an advisor to 491. I'm not here to speak. I'm observing. Thank you. Sorry, I probably clicked the wrong button.
No problem. So the next person that I'll bring in is Georgia Kung. Let's see here. Georgia, I'm not seeing you, so if you could raise your hand, I will be able to bring you in. You just have to click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. Let's see her. Okay, so you're still able to raise your hand, but I'll see if there's anyone else that's looking to testify on this item on 495 Broadway. I don't see anyone else.
Okay, so that's last call. Anyone who is watching and attending our Zoom meeting remotely, if you would like to speak on 495 Broadway, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. There's a button at the bottom of the screen that says raise hand. And
I do not see anyone. That's
okay.
It for this item.
So I think that concludes our testimony. And as has been mentioned by a member of the Public Community Board too, recommended denial of the application. So now I'd like to turn back to the applicant. Rick, would you like to respond to the comments? I think there were particularly comments about the visibility from Mercer Street, if you could walk us through those views again. And there were concerns that a marketing rendering showed something different than what you're proposing that may be more visible from the street. And if you could address that, that would be helpful.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. First of all, I can't speak for the marketing stuff. The application is the application that we have before the commission today. This is not an event space. It's not a party spot. I can't address any issues of drunkenness, but I can say that as far as noise is concerned, consolidating the existing HVAC units on the roof and putting them in one enclosed space will dramatically cut down the noise that these particular units make. As far as the Mercer Street bulkhead is concerned, I think a 5-foot extension built within and set back from existing fabric and built out of brick is discreet and certainly appropriate, I think. In terms of the other issues, I think that I wanted to find the one other thing. I would like to recall to the commissioner's attention that while the Broadway side extension on the bulkhead is a full 11 feet, that bulkhead is a full 39 feet away from the north lot line. So to represent this as being on the lot line is incorrect, completely incorrect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, any last questions before we close the hearing? All right, Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Oh, you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've forgotten if you read the reasoning behind the community board denial.
They were concerned about the visibility of all of the elements.
Okay, thank you. I propose that we close the hearing.
Okay, and Commissioner Lufty, would you second the motion to close the hearing? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so I think, there are maybe concerns about the use of the rooftop here. And of course, we don't regulate use. We look at the physical changes to the building. In this case, there are some bulkheads and railings being proposed, not visible from Broadway, but there's some visibility from Mercer Street, primarily the existing elevator bulkhead, which is at the front of the building, which is a common feature that we actually see in this historic district. So they're proposing to raise that 5 feet in the same material, and then the other installations are set back further. So why don't we begin our discussion? Commissioner Holford Smith, do you want to start this one?
Sure. Understanding that we can't regulate the use of the space, but it is laudable that they want to use the rooftop. And if the Mercer Street is the only location where the elevator can come up, then I think that that's appropriate to raise that. I would obviously ask them to keep it to a minimum. But I think that the rest of the visibility seems to be similar to other rooftop appurtenances that you see in Soho, so I can find it appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree. The only momentary pause that I had was with the decision to step the vertical enlargement of the elevator, that it doesn't just go straight up and relocate the coping. I'm not sure if I know why they did it. It kind of makes sense. They wanted to differentiate between the old and the new. I'm not sure that that's the greatest idea. I don't know, maybe talk with staff about it, but I think it's generally appropriate.
Okay. Commissioner Davenshaw?
Yeah, I had the same thought about the setback. It actually will draw more attention to it than if it was just plainer. So, but otherwise, again, I'd be concerned about noise too, but this is not our purview, so.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland?
Yeah, I guess I'm in the same camp. I'm still mystified why the community board overwhelmingly voted against it. I can only imagine it's because the visibility is not
unusually great at all, to me at least. We're used to seeing this, so I'm guessing they're siding with the neighbors and the noise issue, which I sympathize with, but not our purview.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi, sorry. Okay, all right. Commissioner Jefferson.
I always worry about the degree of visibility, how much is acceptable. And every time I leave here, I think, if that in office, that reward, I have no way of making a judgment. And I know that the technical issue of the override, I understand that. But I also understand that there's other ways of doing this. If you needed to do it, if this loft's apartment, they have to go somewhere else and put the elevator up or something. So I'm always,
I think, when we look at visibility, it's sort of not just sort of how much of it, but in what context do you see it? And so in this particular application, at least for me and maybe for others, the way that you see it is against the backdrop of a taller building in a similar material and typical of rooftop features that you see on this building type in this particular district, including the elevator at the front where it's an existing elevator and they're raising it. Okay. Okay. All right. Commissioner Gustafson?
Appropriate as is.
Okay. So made it around. All right, I think we have enough to approve it as is, but we'll ask them to explore eliminating the setback.
In the matter of LPC 2106057, 495 Broadway in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, a Beaux-Arts style store and loft building designed by Alfred Zucker, built in 1892-1893. Application is to construct rooftop bulkheads and railings. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the presence of visible rooftop bulkheads and railings is common in this historic district and compatible with its industrial character, that the bulkhead extensions and glass railings will be seen from within the context of a complex roofscape and in conjunction with other buildings which feature rooftop accretions of varying sizes, massing, and silhouettes, that the bulkheads will not be seen directly over the Broadway facade and where visible in views over the Mercer Street facade, they will be only slightly larger than the existing bulkheads, and that the bulkheads and railings will feature simple profiles, typical materials, and finishes which will blend with their context, helping them remain secondary background elements in the roofscape. The applicant will work with staff to explore the bulkhead extension on Mercer Street, whether to step it back or to raise it up straight.
Okay, great. And Commissioner Copeland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland. Commissioner Chen.
Not here.
Not here. Commissioner Devonshire. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum. Aye. Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi. You're not, Commissioner, are you abstaining? Or you? Gotcha. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
So with 7 in favor, 1 and 1 abstaining, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved. Thank you. And, continue to work with the staff to explore that need for that setback, but it's otherwise approved as is. And we'll move to the next item.
Okay, the next item is public hearing item number 7, LPC 21-07952, application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 500, lot 7505, 101 Greene Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is a modern building constructed in 2002, and the application is to alter storefront infill.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. cast out the vacant space by the parties. Promise this is the last time you'll see me today. The project is storefront work at 101 Greene Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. And the area of work is limited just the four storefront bays, and I'll point them out in the photograph. These 4 bays here. The proposal is to strip the paint off these storefronts and refinish the underlying mahogany wood. A bit of history first. The building that's there today dates actually to 2005. Historically, there was a pair of cast iron fronted buildings that were completed in 1879, 101 Greene Street, and to the north, 103, 105 Greene Street. And in the 1940s or 1950s, there was a fire at 101 Greene Street, and the building came down. And at the time of designation, there was a 2-story garage on the site at 101 Greene Street that was constructed in 1957. And then the image on the right is the 1980s text photo. You can see that sort of gap in the streetscape along the west side of Greene Street. In 2002, there was a proposal brought forward by Joseph Lombardi to reconstruct 101 Greene Street, which is the building on the left side of the elevation, along with rooftop additions, which was approved by the commission at that time. And at that time, the proposal at the base of the building was to carry forward the paint scheme from the windows above and to have raised storefronts at both elevations. Subsequent to that, there was a hearing for 101 Greene Street to actually bring the storefronts down to grade. That was not carried forward to 103. So the buildings presently actually do not match up at the base of the building. One has a platform, and you'll see this in photographs. One has a platform, and ultimately now has an ADA compliant ramp. But this is the approved elevation from about 20 years ago. And this is the current condition at the base of the building today at 101 Greene Street. 103 is obviously off to the right of the photograph. You can see the steps and the front edge of the AD ramp at the adjacent property. And so the scope of work is to strip the paint off of this circa 2002, 2003 storefront and to apply a clear resin to expose the underlying mahogany wood. There's a point, actually, there's armature here for a bracket sign, and that metal armature is going to come down, but we're going to use the existing attachments, and the proposal is for a wood armature as part of this proposal. The staff rules allow only for metal armatures and not wood armatures, and that the metal armature must be finished to be harmonious with the storefront infill. So we're proposing a wood armature that will actually be in the same finish and material as the storefront. So that's also under review. Some additional existing photographs, just so you can see, very nicely detailed. The facade was constructed and replicated off of the adjacent remaining historic building, and the storefront infill was redone under that second C of A to bring it to an at grade entry, and that to dates to 2003. Turning to a few rendered images. So the existing storefronts on the upper left, and then rendered images below, and I'll get into a little bit more detail about how the paint will be stripped and how the resin will be applied. But you can see the underlying wood is a mahogany, and it will have a clear coat resin on the front of it. It'll actually really sort of work with the palette of the building. It's very close to the actual red clay, which is the name of the color for the windows and the existing doors, but will obviously be the exposed wood and not a painted finish. We've done a rough sample, let's say, as you can see across the base of this slide. The idea is to strip the paint from all the wood elements, and then put this clear coat resin. The product is an architectural grade resin. The manufacturer, it's an Italian manufacturer, Gobetto. Perhaps some of you may know it. It was new to me, but we'll use a Smart Strip, a Dumont paint stripper, restoration grade paint stripper, to take the paint off of the storefronts. following manufacturer's guidelines in terms of dwell times, plastic scrapers, no metal tools. Then it'll be lightly sanded, and then the resin would be applied over the mahogany infill. And the rendering above illustrates what the proposed finished storefront would look like, as well as painting the door that same red clay that's on the far left side of that upper image. And then you can see just up at the top the wood armature for the bracket sign. And just in conversations with the staff, there were some comments about the texture or the quality of the application of the resin. This sample was actually applied with a brush, but the resin will be applied with a smooth spatula, so it won't have brush strokes. It will actually appear quite uniform. But of course, the underlying wood substrate is going to be rough, so it won't be, and it's quite thin, so it won't be a thick, clear shell, let's say. It'll actually have some texture to it and some life to it. Existing elevation, proposed elevation coming up in just a second. To illustrate the areas of work, again, these 4 storefront bays and the armature for the bracket sign. Some details for the storefront. Again, it's going to be a thin application of the resin, and then the bracket sign details. The sign itself is compliant with the rules. It's just the armature that is wood that requires presentation to you all for that element. Really sort of minimal signage. Just focusing on the resin for a moment, one of the things that we did in terms of research for the project, I think we've all become very accustomed, particularly in Soho, to painted storefronts. But when one begins to do some research and look throughout the districts, there are actually quite a number of unpainted or varnished storefronts, both contemporary but also historic. This one just down the block or just up the block on Greene Street actually has a combination of a few different eras of wood doors with stain finishes, sort of a varnished, shiny stain finish, as well as painted infill. So it's a sort of combination. In this bay, there are other elements. This is now near 125, just up the street on Greene Street. Again, stained storefront infill, and it's a condition that one sees presently in the district. And also doing research, we found that actually historically, many of the storefronts in the district were actually also unpainted. And this is 149 Worcester Street, which went through a 74 7-Eleven. And at the start of that project, all the storefronts had been painted. And in the process of doing paint or finish analysis, working with Mary Jablonski, she did sampling and actually determined that the paint was actually a later finish, that the underlying substrate was a varnished wood. And so this is just copies from her report from about 15 years ago. And in talking with her, she says there's actually a number of storefronts like this in Soho that would have had, the substrate would have been oak or pine, a light finish. Then that would have been stained, and then on top of that would have been a varnish, a spar varnish, coach varnish, something that would have been quite durable and quite shiny. So what's interesting is that this finish that we're proposing, while it has a sort of contemporary quality to it in terms of the product, the ultimate result is actually something that would have existed in some of the storefronts around the district. So just in conclusion, the work that's being carried out here today is taking place on storefront infill that dates to about 2003, 2004. There is already variation at the base of these 2 buildings between 101 and 103, 105, and that the finish is consistent with other historic treatments, similar historic treatments in the district. And then finally, just regarding the blade sign, the armature will actually be harmonious. The finish of the armature will be harmonious with the infill, as sort of the expectation is from the staff rules. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions, commissioners? All right, let's go to public testimony. And again, we're going to start with those who signed in advance and those who are present. So we're going to start with Simeon Bankoff.
Test. Okay, good. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Simeon Bankoff, Historic Districts Council. Although this is a new building, it was designed in such a way to blend into the historic streetscape. However, one seldom finds a clear finished wood storefront in Soho. So the proposed design interrupts the visual environment and draws attention to itself in what we found to be a most unwelcome way. HGC recommends a different storefront treatment that takes its cue from the design of the contemporary building and is more in keeping with the Soho's cast iron historic district.
Thank you. John Graham. Oh, he left? Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Anthony Fabry to see if he is participating remotely. And no one else has signed up to speak on this item, but if you are a member of the public and you are attending the Zoom meeting, please, and you'd like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you.
Oh, it just moved up now. There's a delay. John, you should be in the meeting. You just have to unmute your microphone and turn on your camera if you wish to. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham from the VSNY. The VSNY was very interested to see this proposal coming forth. For one of our board members was the LPC staff person who took the application for the new building on this site to public hearing nearly 20 years ago. We are fully aware that this is a modern building, but the fact that it was built in the 21st century doesn't mean that anything goes or that its relationship to its sister building at 103, 105 Greene and to the streetscape is unimportant. Therefore, VSNY urges the Commission in the strongest way possible to deny this proposal to strip the painted wood finish from the storefront infill and to provide a new resin coating at these 4 bays. Commissioners, when I took this building to public hearing, staff was fully aware that the LPC does not typically approve replica buildings. 101 Greene is the exception because its sister building is intact, which means that the new street facade we see today is a true measured recreation of the one which was destroyed in the 1950s. Since the LPC approved this recreation, we believe that the LPC should now ensure that any new materials or finishes maintain the building's stylistic integrity and match materials or finishes used in the late 19th century. Since resin finishes or any stained shellac or varnish finishes were rarely used for storefronts in that period, they shouldn't be introduced here. To support their proposal for a resin finish, the applicant has provided photographs showing the use of stained wood at 5 buildings in Soho. But we noted that at 3 of these buildings, only the doors are stained, that all 3 sets of doors are showing signs of weather-related deterioration, and that the adjacent storefront infill each is painted. At 149 Worcester, the applicant has provided an analysis of the historic paint layers. It states that the windows were originally varnished oak. However, it doesn't list a finish for the doors or bulkheads or the divisions between display windows. That leaves 419 West Broadway, but one example doesn't seem like enough. Finally, Commissioners, we would point out that the storefront infill at 101 doesn't have a stone base, which means that the wood storefront framing rests directly on the concrete sidewalk, is vulnerable to salt, snow, and ice, and is at risk for rot. We believe a painted finish is much easier to maintain and will help preserve this storefront, the overall appearance of the building, and the character of the streetscape. Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Thank you. I do not see any other hands raised for this item.
Okay, so that concludes the testimony. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, just briefly, I think this notion that because this type of finish seldom occurs in the historic district, this should be found as inappropriate. I don't really agree with that. That thinking it is a documented finish in the district, both contemporary finish, but also historic. And in terms of the second comments, I think Victorian Society is actually mistaken. The bulkheads were painted at the start of that project and were stained wood subsequent to that as part of the 74-711 process for that project. So this is in keeping. It is a different material, but visually it's going to have a very similar effect to a varnished storefront. It's just a contemporary material. And in terms of longevity, I think the resin actually is a very tough material and it can be easily applied. There are plenty of painted storefronts that are in poor condition because they're not kept up. But the tenant, who is our client, the retail tenant, this is exclusively their frontage. They're going to make sure that the front of this building and the front of their storefront remains in good condition. So we'll maintain the storefronts and we'll maintain the coating.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? Yeah, okay, all right. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing? So moved. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion? All in favor, say aye. 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 Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Bland, would you like to start this one?
Is it really only the?
It's for the
Looking at, that's it?
4 storefront bays. The door to the upstairs will be painted to match the windows, the color that the windows above are painted, which is similar in tone. It's a reddish color that's it's not that different than the brownish red varnish. So they look similar, but they're actually.
Yeah. All right.
The 4 storefront bays.
I'm from personal experience. I know that the maintenance, I'm sure Mr. Devonshire will speak on this too. The maintenance of this is going to be horrendous. But I don't think we can vote against it necessarily if that's what they want to do. I don't think it's that unusual. I mean, you do see doors particularly, maybe not whole shop fronts. Maybe others will disagree, but I think I can approve it, I suppose. I think it's foolhardy, but.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we do typically lean toward painted finishes, but I think it is persuasive that another building had a historic finish analysis and found a similar finish to be the original layer or historic layer, and that seems to be the case on other buildings in the district. Commissioner Devonshire?
I think my biggest fear here would be their ability to get the existing paint off so that there's not a lot of residue in it. And from the mop-up, it looks like they were able to be successful because it's a resin. It's a polyester resin. I think it will have a better performance life than most paints will. So I kind of approve it.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I think I, despite the use of resin, I do share Fred's concern that it will probably not hold up so well unless they're going to remove it and then resin underneath, it's the sidewalk or something. I imagine it's going to be some leaching of water / salt up into it, but that's their problem, I guess. I think it's appropriate. I really, yes, if our standards were to maintain the strict historical quality in amber, so to speak, I think that this would probably be unorthodox, but I don't think that in this case it's inappropriate, especially when we give a whole lot more leeway than this to regular storefronts that are historic.
That's true. Commissioner Holford Smith?
I can find it appropriate.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson? Great. Commissioner Jefferson? Appropriate. And Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's harmonious with the rest of the building, and this is a new building. So I think it's fine, and it can always be changed.
Okay. Commissioner Bland, would you read the motion?
Let's see. In the matter of 101 Greene Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, this is an application to alter storefront infill. I note that the building is a modern recreation of a historic building constructed pursuant to commission approval. I recommend approval, noting that the proposed work is reversible and will be consistent with types of changes that occur periodically over time at storefronts and entrances found throughout this historic district. That the proposed dark stained and resin coated finish of the storefronts and matching wood finish at the bracket sign armature will be harmonious with the color palette of the building and will not call undue attention to itself. That the proposed finish will recall historic stain finishes sometimes found at buildings
in this historic district, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the building, the streetscape, or the historic district.
All right, and Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion? And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum. Aye. Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved. Thank you. We'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing number 8, LPC 21-09865. Application for a certificate of appropriateness, the Borough of Manhattan, block 485, lot 22, 93 Mercer Street in Soho Cast Iron Historic District. It's a loft building designed by Hill and Turner, built in 1901. The application is to install a barrier-free access ramp and replace doors.
My name is Ted Queensmith. I'm presenting the accessible entrance to 93 Mercer Street. It's located in the Soho Cast Iron District. This is the historic tax photo as well as the existing condition of the facade. As you can see, there's a marble step at the entrance to the residential entrance, which is closer to me, and a black diamond plate step at the commercial entrance. The proposed ramp would serve both entrances. That's a picture of the marble step. That's going to remain as is, and we're just going to butt the new landing up to it. So you can see how the landing serves both of the entrances. We're also going to be redoing some of the concrete and reinforcing the vault as part of this work. The entrance to the residential part of the building, the door is not currently large enough, so we will be replacing the doors. They end up being not symmetrical in order to get the size, but other than that, we're going to try to replicate the historic details of the door as closely as possible. And there's an elevation of the proposed work.
Can I ask a question about just like ADA code? Revealing my own ignorance.
Sure.
So just Commissioner Goldblum. Yeah.
So ADA code question. You're not providing a railing at the stair areas where you're assuming people are going to walk directly into the building, not, people who are able to use stairs, right? That's at the 2 sets of doors. Are you required to have the railing for the rest of the way, or would it be acceptable, for instance, to have a curb or something to keep you from falling off the edge? For the space in front of the show window in between the 2 sets of doors.
It's our understanding that the landing of the ramp needs to have a railing. And in this case, for the residential entrance, that whole thing becomes the landing of that. I have been through this with DOT and DOB fairly extensively.
Okay, thanks.
The structure of the landing will be concrete, but it will be covered in the diamond plate. This is better construction for longevity. Some additional details. You can see the door. We're trying to maintain as much of the detailing as possible. And there are several similar types of installations around the neighborhood and district. These are some examples of both accessible entrances and landings that serve more than one door.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, let's see. Nobody has signed up for this, to speak on this particular application. Is there anyone in the room who would like to? Okay. And I just want to just check also if you're participating remotely, if you would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand. Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay. All right. So we don't have any members of the public who would like to speak. So commissioners, unless we have any other questions, let's go ahead and move to, okay. Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
The community board.
It's not in the same place. Sorry. Community Board 2 recommended approval of the application. Thank you.
So moved.
Commissioner Jefferson, would you second the motion to close the hearing?
I second the motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, all right, so this is, in a district where we do have a lot of loading platforms and other ramps in front of storefronts with black diamond plate. This does seem fairly consistent and it will serve both entrances. Commissioner Jefferson, do you have any thoughts on this particular application? Do you have any thoughts on it?
Oh, thoughts. Appropriate.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, it fits in fine with the buildings around it, and it's a simple.
Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith?
I think it's fine.
Okay.
Agreed.
Agreed. Does everybody else agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go ahead. Commissioner Jefferson, would you read the motion? Thank you.
For the matter of LPC 21-909-865, 93 Mercer Street, Soho Class I Historic District. Application is to install a barrier-free access ramp and replace doors. I note that the building style, scale, and materials and details are among the features that contribute to the special character of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. I recommend approval finding that the proposed ramp will provide barrier-free access to both the storefront and residential entrances without eliminating any significant architectural feature or historic paving. That the low height and simple design of the ramp and landing will not overwhelm the facade, while still allowing for visibility of architectural features such as the decorative metalwork at the storefront bulkheads. That the diamond plate clad concrete ramp and metal railing will be in keeping with other similar installation found at stairs, platforms, vaults, and ramps found throughout the historic district. That the replacement of the wood residential entrance doors will match the material detail and finish of the historic doors and will only be modified in terms of configuration and operation to provide barrier-free access, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural or historical character of the building or historic district.
Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson, would you second the motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown. Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move to hearing item number 9, LPC 21-08152, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1144, lot 31, 103 West 72nd Street in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. It's an Art Deco style apartment and commercial building designed by Fellheimer and Wagner and built in 1931 to 33. The application is to replace storefront infill and construct a rear yard addition.
Great. Hello, good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Robert Bianco with PKSB Architects, representing the owners of 103 West 72nd Street, located in the Upper West Side Historic District. I'll be presenting our application for storefront alterations and rear yard addition for the ground floor commercial tenant. The existing tenant, Malachi's Irish Pub, is remaining in place, and I mentioned that. I see some applause. I mentioned that up front because the logistics of working around an in-place tenant have informed a lot of our design decisions. The goal here really is to improve the facade, improve the look of the facade, to allow for increased seating capacity with the proper spacing requirements, and to provide for increased natural ventilation, all while trying to minimize the impact on the existing tenants' day-to-day operations. So with that in mind, a little bit of background on the building. This was originally built as a row house in the late 1800s and was altered in 1930 to be a multifamily residential building with commercial on the ground floor. And the facade that exists today is, the 1930s facade is what is designated in the designation report. The base was replaced with a two-story or double height marble facade, stone cladding at the upper floors, and glass and metal storefront at the ground floor. And you can see in the center photo and in the zoomed in portion up at the top, we were able to find this photo of the neighbor's 1940s tax photo, which showed the awning the retractable awning in its fully extended position, and the transom panels of the glass and metal storefront actually had operable awning portions. So from this photo, we were able to confirm that the vertical striping is actually a pattern that's been etched into the original glazing. And what exists today, a good portion of the marble still exists. A lot of the original metal framing, storefront framing does exist, but all of the glazing and all of the operable portions have been removed. There's been some sheet metal cladding put over portions of the marble, and some existing non-conforming signage and non-conforming awning. The central large display window has been removed, and a small two-pane window exists. The original historic door does still exist at the residential entry on the right-hand side, but it's been removed from the bar entry on the left-hand side. And this is just a few closer photos of those conditions. So we are proposing to remove all of the non-historic portions of the infill, remove the sheet metal cladding, also removing non-conforming signage and awning, and replacing with a design that better approximates the historic condition. We are proposing to install a new door at the bar entry that would replicate the historic condition and match the residential entry door. We're proposing a blade sign and bracket sign and awning that conforms with Landmark's rules, maintaining all of the existing storefront framing that is still in place, and the infill is a custom metal panel that would replicate the patterning of the etched glass, and I'll explain a little bit why we went in that direction shortly. And one last item, we are removing the existing fixed display window and replacing with operable cafe doors that would allow for the bar frontage to be open to the sidewalk. And our application includes a full lot coverage rear yard addition that would be an extension of the bar's existing bar space. And seen in section shortly. Yeah, here it is. So a little more detail on the storefront. For precedent, we looked at other double height storefronts along 72nd Street at similar buildings, similar row houses, converted row house buildings that now have commercial on the lower floors. And a lot of similar configurations, symmetrically placed doors on either side of the storefront, a large central display window, and most of them also have some operable portions at the upper portion of the storefront. But what's different about these conditions is that these buildings all have a true second story that really breaks that storefront expression horizontally. Our building never had 2 stories. We were always just a very tall 1-story retail space, and the expression has always been a lot more vertical. We did look at some photos from the interior. These photos are looking above the bar's drop ceiling back toward the street, and we did confirm that the green portions that you see are the historic storefront framing, but all the glazing has been removed and all the operable portions have been removed. And this framing is very, very thin, probably had single pane glass, so it doesn't really, it's not quite robust enough to accommodate modern storefront glazing systems. And we did probe the pier to confirm that the marble does still exist behind the sheet metal cladding. Existing and proposed enlarged plans at the storefront with the door configuration is remaining essentially the same, and the central fixed windows being replaced with inoperable cafe doors that would retract to allow the restaurant to expand their seating to the sidewalk. Again, we're proposing removal of the non-conforming illuminated sandbox, removal of the existing awning and non-conforming lighting, removal of the sheet metal cladding to expose historic marble behind, replacement of the bar's entry door with a door that replicates the historic configuration, and awning and bracket sign that conform to landmarks rules. The central cafe doors, the operable cafe doors, will have a solid opaque panel at the bottom to reference a bulkhead when the doors are fully closed. And the metal panels between the existing historic storefront framing will have a custom pattern that replicates the etched glazing pattern. Some existing and proposed section elevations through the 2 entry doors. The condition at the residential entry door remains largely the same, and the bar entry door will have a little bit more exposed marble cladding. Existing and proposed section through the storefront, replacement of the single fixed window with the folding cafe doors, and new awning and bracket sign.
So you're proposing a permanent
a fixed awning.
Fixed awning with a non-glazed transom or panel behind it.
Yes, yeah, and that's really because there is existing structure at the head of the existing windows, and we're trying to reuse that, just trying to minimize the amount of demo that impacts the tenant's interior space.
Thank you.
Details at the bracket sign, which will have integral concealed LED lighting. A section through the cafe doors with the solid panel at the bottom to approximate a bulkhead, and section through the replacement door at the bar entry. Section through the awning with a 12-inch skirt and lettering on the skirt, and an example of the custom metal panel that would have those vertical stripes. And a rendering comparison of the existing condition on the left. We've rendered the storefront with the doors in the both in the closed position and the open position. And you know, this is, other than the cafe doors, this is largely a cosmetic alteration, and that's really because the tenants in place, they've had a rough year, and we're trying to minimize the disruption to their operations.
Maybe you could move to the rear yard addition and just let us know the context back there.
So again, the rear yard, extension of the existing dining space and adjacent buildings shown in the hatch pattern. On the left, standing in the rear yard, looking back at the rear of the building, there is an existing 2.5-story bustle that projects into the rear yard. In the center, looking back toward adjacent properties at 73rd Street. And then on the right, this is a photo just looking down from the adjacent building. And in looking at the full block plan, we wanted to highlight other similar type buildings, converted row houses with commercial ground floors, and those are starred in red. You'll see that most of them have rear yard additions. Most of them extend side lot line to side lot line, and there are about 6 of them that extend fully to the rear lot line, one of which directly abuts the north rear lot line of our property. So, proposed condition. And in 3D, existing condition, we've highlighted that existing 2.5-story bustle on our building right here. And there is an existing full lot coverage addition directly abutting our north lot line. And proposed condition, 1-story full coverage. The addition will be about 15 feet above curb level. And we're proposing 2 skylights to provide some natural light into the dining space, 1 mechanical unit on a lower portion of the roof, so trying to keep that as far away from the lot lines as possible. Existing and proposed rear elevation. Existing and proposed west elevation as seen from 105 West 72nd.
Okay. We get
That's pretty much the answer.
gist of it. Okay, great. So it's 1 story and it's ranked by apartment buildings and faces another full lot extension behind it. Okay, so we'll move to public testimony, and we'll start with people who signed up in advance, and first start with people who are in person. So we're going to start with Reverend Kay Carpin.
Thanks. I'm Kay Carpin, co-chair of the Preservation Committee at CB7. It's good to be back here, see you in real life. CB7 overwhelmingly supports this application. We voted just last week 38-0 with 1 abstention. So on the front facade, we appreciate the sensitivity, the historic legacy of the building, and the use of what historic fabric remains. The reemergence of the marble stone surrounding the lower floors and the use of the existing 1930s Art Deco door as a template for both the accordion and the store entrance door is particularly important and welcome. to us. The use of metal panels on the mezzanine within the existing and historic metal frame is an appropriate compromise since the metal frame can't bear the weight of modern glass and the details emulate the original. We approve the new awning and the blade sign as necessary to the business. Blade signs done sensitively, of course, add to the character of the historic district. And we worry that without it, the new facade would lack the visibility of the present one, although in our opinion, any West Sider worth his or her pint knows where Malachi's is. On the rear extension, we are usually skeptical of a huge rear yard extension of this sort. But in this case, we support the full-length one-story addition. Feel it would not just detract from the historic character of the block. We are pleased that while zoning would permit a structure 23 feet tall, this one is a more modest 15 feet. However, we're not excited about what was proposed as a stucco finish of the rear extension, as we expressed. We would recommend an exterior clad in common red brick or the equivalent. Community Board 7 in general is supportive of our small businesses, and we see their preservation as related to and vital to the precious historic character of our neighborhood. So thank you again.
Great, thank you. All right, before we move to our remote participants, is there anyone else in the hearing room that would like to speak on this item? Okay, so now I will turn it over to Anthony Fabre to take us through our remote participants. We have Sean Corsandi, I know, signed up, and we may have others.
The first person that I'll bring in is Sean Corsandi. Sean, you should be in the meeting. You just have to unmute your microphone, turn on your camera if you wish to, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Sean Corsandi for Landmark West, and thank you for your patience today. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee is excited to see Malachi's Pup not only surviving, but thriving during these difficult times, and we wholeheartedly support their northward expansion with a rear yard addition. While the lot coverage and scale are appropriate for commercial first floors, we echo the concerns of others in the community about the stucco cladding and believe that brick walls would reduce future maintenance impacts on neighbors. Regarding the storefront, we're eager to see this building return to its intended facade. Replicating the original door is fantastic, but why then refashion the hopper windows as blind panels, especially when removing obstructions as shown in section? We'd also prefer a retractable awning, which is more common to the commercial corridor and original to this building as shown in the historic photos. In fact, none of the included context photos exhibit a projecting fixed frame awning of any kind. While not trying to dampen our enthusiasm, we do have two wishes. First, this facade is unlikely to receive another makeover of this caliber for decades. We would ask the client and the commission to seriously consider replacement of the missing liver-veined marble panel at the upper left of the store enframement. Second, with such a seemingly simple facade, any deviation is more strongly perceived. The original composition had a triumphal central 1.5 bay high window, which emphasized the storefront, informed the second-story mullion benchmarks, and evoked a stepping motif so signature to the Deco style. By assimilating the central second-story panels into the surround of that floor, the reading is lost, and the minimal storefront is suppressed, pushed back down to the street rather than offering the uplifting moment that raised one's eye and let this little building stand among its neighbors like George and Edward Blum's domineering Schurger-esque apartment house due west. At the very least, we would suggest a different treatment for those central second-tier panels. We truly are very happy to support this proposal and feel that these slight modifications can meet modern needs while still honoring the building. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our signups, but I do see a hand raised, and I'll bring in Megan Weatherby. Megan, you should be in the meeting. You just have to unmute your microphone, turn on your camera if you wish to, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
I'm Megan Weatherby, the Executive Director of the Art Deco Society of New York, and we are delighted to support the proposed storefront alterations for 103 West 72nd Street. The original storefront visible in the historic images included in the proposal's materials was a lovely, if simple, Art Deco entranceway, complementing the modern design of the building's upper stories. Sadly, it disappeared long ago. Storefronts in New York are so often ephemeral, generally the first thing to be, quote, modernized, and an older building. What a pleasure then it is to see a proposal that brings the original storefront back from the dead. To the building's owners and architect, we say thank you.
Thank you. I do not see any other hands raised for this item.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to respond to some of the comments and suggestions that we heard in the testimony?
Sure. I'll first respond to CB7's recommendation for the rear. We'd be happy to consider a different finish, but if we did go in the direction of brick, it would probably be a thin brick, just so we can keep that wall construction as simple as possible and thin as possible to maximize the interior space. And then I had a little bit of a hard time hearing Landmarks West comments, but I think it had to do with the fixed portion above the cafe doors. And we'd be, again, happy to consider a different patterning or finish, but it would also be cosmetic. It's just not in the cards right now to do that extensive of a storefront glazing replacement, but we feel that this design allows for future renovations that would be more restorative.
Okay, thank you. Any final questions? Yes, Commissioner Devonshire.
I have the same question that Sean had. Why are you not replacing the missing panel on the upper left-hand corner of the window?
Oh, okay. Now I understand what he was saying. I didn't hear that comment. Again, it is more of a cost concern right now, and just not knowing what is. We know that there is marble behind the existing sheet metal, but we don't know the full extent or condition of everything. So if there is additional marble to be reused, we could certainly consider that once construction begins, but it's really, again, we're trying to set the stage for future more restorative interventions. Right now, this is a very minimal approach based on the tenant's current situation.
So what are you proposing in that section where the marble is not going to be removed?
It looks like it's been polished over, stuccoed over, and we would maintain that.
So you're leaving it as is.
And we leave it as is and maybe touch up the stucco if needed. Yeah.
Okay, so if they're not changing the enfrainment, I guess the question is, can we compel them to change the enfrainment if they're not proposing to touch it? Okay. So this is really about changes to the infill within that enfrainment. And so the enfrainment isn't technically before us at this time.
Correct.
Okay.
One question.
Just for the record, I want to note it's Commissioner Jefferson speaking.
What are we seeing in elevation outside? What about the actual elevation that we're voting on?
Be patient.
Where's the missing panel on the floor?
Sorry, what's the question?
No, that it was showing
Missing
the
marble.
missing panel.
Yeah, that's right. It's above it's partially hidden by the sign band right now. We think that there's a little bit more that goes down to the,
So they're
to this cross.
removing cladding that conceals the pier, but that is the extent of it, and otherwise doing cosmetic work on the infill within the enfrainment. All right. Any final other questions?
Question about that, how big is that panel? And what kind of marble is it?
There's been some conflicting opinions about the marble. Parts of it appear to be a verde marble, and other parts seem to be more of like a rosy, more purpley marble. I'm blanking on the name of it. And the size of the panel, I think it's dimensioned in a later drawing. I apologize for the lag.
Just to clarify here, looking at the historic photos, it actually appears to staff, and we've been talking with the architect about this, that the marble around the surround is not the original marble seen in the historic photo. The veining is different, the tonality is different, and it may have been the green marble that you're seeing at the returns at the storefront was used everywhere and was later replaced. Now, again, though, the applicant is not actually proposing to do anything with the stone surround and is leaving in place anything that's revealed. So I'm not sure that that work is entirely relevant, but just to be clear, we don't believe that the surround is the original marble. It's a replacement in a different color.
But it does appear that some of the original exists behind the existing sheet metal next to the bar door.
Can I ask Michael a short question?
Yes.
Does this kind of green marble fade? Does this kind of green marble fade in the sun?
Yeah, that was our thinking also, that it could just be the original marble that's faded.
Yeah, I think the veining is different.
If we want to go back to the historic photo, you could look at it. Just when you zoom in and out, it's more obvious.
Right. So and we can look at that, and we think the veining looks different in the historic photographs than in the current photographs. But again, the marble enfrainment is not part of this application. Okay.
But we're setting the stage. It could be in the future.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, so let's have Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion? Second. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed, and we'll begin our discussion. There are two components. One is for the one-story full lot rear yard addition that is on this building, which is flanked by larger apartment buildings, and there are other full lot additions around it. And there was a question about materiality, which the applicant said they would study. The second part of the application is for the changes, the cosmetic changes to the infill. I think we have an existing condition that is very altered, and I think it's making cosmetic changes that bring it back to its historic appearance is a first good step. And so, I think we would all love to see that marble restored, but as we talk about the infill, let's focus on the appropriateness of those cosmetic changes. Okay, Commissioner Devonshire, would you like to start this one?
Sure. Good start. I'm okay with the work in the rear. It's a very good start on the front. And I look forward to you exposing all that marble so I can come up here and then write a letter to you about it. Thanks. I can approve this.
All right, great. Commissioner Goldblum?
Well, I agree that it's a good start. I think that the rear yard addition is appropriate. I think stucco is better than thin brick, just from a kind of LPC policy point of view. I understand that the marble's out, and I can tell you, cladding marble is cheap. They're spending more on roofing for their one-story addition than they would spend to replace all the marble to reclad this in Verde per the original, but that's for another day. I do think that the choice of going with a metal panel system in lieu of a glass system for the storefront infill is peculiar. And I don't understand it even from a cost point of view. I can't imagine that it's a whole lot cheaper. And one thing that I do note that you see very clearly in the photo on the left is the dimensionality of the grid, of the storefront grid used. So, I mean, my first suggestion would be for them to consider using a fritted glass, even if it's back painted or shadow boxed, and a dimensional super fat wood or metal framing system. I mean, the wood would be really cheap, but and it would be fine in my opinion. But you know, this is probably a cladding over wood. But you could get an aluminum system, and at least it would have a dimensionality. I mean, you could buy a Cornier 4-inch tube system that would probably be a much better recollection of this, and it would be well within the bar's budget, I would guess. So that's recommendation number one. Recommendation number two is I agree with, and I appreciate the applicant's indication of flexibility regarding the central bay. And I think that the upper transom should be a shadow box with glass, clear glass, not the fritted pattern, such that a future tenant could reopen it as a double height with a retractable awning.
Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith.
I agree with everything that Michael Goldblum just said.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
Well, if the standard for us was a substantial improvement right there, this would be appropriate. I think they did a very good job with the fitting into the Art Deco style. I accept that there could be more appropriate approaches, but that's not our standard. As it is appropriate. And they should take into account Commissioner Goldblum's comments.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree with John.
Okay. Commissioner Lutfi.
I'm on board with everything that's been said. And did someone say that, I don't know if someone said this, that the awning should be retractable? Yeah, okay. Okay.
Well, I just want to point out that we could approve a fixed awning at staff level at the storefront. So the rules allow the staff to approve fixed awnings.
Okay.
So that means it will be fixed. I think it would be inconsistent with our rules for every other storefront.
All right.
Anyway, I'm glad that the applicant has made this move. And the building was an eyesore, and now it's really going to, have a wonderful, a much improved presence on the block. And I look forward to more changes. Okay, so I think, we've heard some suggestions to instead of doing the metal within the existing framing, to actually replace the framing altogether and to do a glazed system, which is a separate application, right? I think so. It's within keeping the existing framing.
Correct, that's correct.
If the existing sort of perimeter framing, this framing system is historic, and they do want to retain that and work with that system. And I think they've said to us that it cannot hold the weight of modern insulated glazing, for example.
So with that in mind, with being able to keep historic framing, would you be comfortable with the metal in lieu of a glazed system? dimensionality. Okay, all right. So then I think we can get to an action today. Commissioner Devonshire, would you feel comfortable reading a motion to approve and to continue to work? I'm sorry? Okay. Well, let me do it. I'll do it. Sure. Okay. In the matter of docket number LPC 2108-152, 103 West 72nd Street in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District, an Art Deco style apartment building and commercial building, Art Deco style apartment and commercial building designed by Fellheimer and Wagner and built in 1931 to 33. This is an application to replace storefront infill and construct a rear yard addition. And I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the removal of the existing metal paneling, awning, and signage will eliminate unsympathetic alterations and will expose the historic metal framing and marble cladding at the storefront, that the proposed storefront infill, consisting of 3 operable metal doors with tall bases that align with the historic entry doors, will result in a uniform condition across the base of the building that maintains a high level of transparency. That the proposed metal infill panels with a vertical striping pattern in the historic framing will be evocative of the original etched glazing seen in the historic photographs and will feature a silver finish that matches the extant historic door and exposed storefront framing. And that the proposed stucco clad rear yard addition will not be visible from any public thoroughfare, and that the extension of the rear addition to cover the full lot will be consistent with other buildings on this block that feature deep and full lot rear extensions and will not diminish a cohesive central green space. However, I recommend that the applicant continue to work with the staff on the detailing of the metal infill panels at the storefront infill to ensure there is a dimensionality that is consistent with the articulation of the historic glazing. Okay. And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum. Aye. Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 7 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
So that's approved. Please continue to work with the staff, and we'll now move to the next item.
Thank you.
Okay, item 10, LPC 21-10833, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1389, lot 945 Madison Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District. It's a modern style museum building designed by Marcel Brewer and Associates and built in 1964 and 66. And the application is to install signage. I believe this applicant is remote and can begin now.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for taking the time to review our project. My name is Luciano Johnson. I am here on behalf of the Frick Collection. We are applying for a permit to continue to display vinyl decals on the windows at 945 Madison, what we are calling Frick Madison, in the very wonderful building designed by Marcel Breuer. The graphics were designed by Pentagram. We collaborated with the partners Michael Barut and Abbott Miller, who led the project. For those of you who may not know, this signage is existing, and we were approved for a staff level permit. We are before you today simply because of timeline. We'd like to extend how long we have this up. So I tried to advance here. A little too far, but that's okay. I'm not going to read this, obviously. I'm just going to highlight the graphics in this presentation that we currently have on display. And I want to talk about why we think the graphics are important. We are the third museum in 6 years to occupy this building, and we think that this helps distinguish us from our peers. Secondly, we want to make sure the public understands that this is an active site of cultural importance, and they're welcome to take advantage of the opportunity to see our collection in this new space. We think if we took them down, it may send a confusing message about the museum. And lastly, taking this down would miss out on the opportunity, as as more people are feeling comfortable going to visit cultural heritage sites, of informing residents and visitors to the city that we're open. Additionally, I'd say it helps to attract foot traffic to the area for the businesses on the street. This is just simply showing where we are, lot 50 on the corner of 75th. Here is historic photos. These are around 2003, the one on the left, I believe, maybe 2010. The Whitney had applied for exterior signage that you can see on the right on that wall separating us from our neighbors, to identifying signage similar, at least in spirit, to what we have up currently. So this is just a southeast facing view of the whole block, showing the ground level businesses and residential buildings adjacent to Frick Madison. Again, we hope that we bring foot traffic to the area that might benefit these businesses. We also may note that it's not a terribly intrusive graphic display. Just another detail of that signage, also showing the existing banners. And then a view from below showing the complete Frick Madison logo text. And here you can see the letters are approximately 6 feet high. The word Frick is about 26 feet across, and the word Madison stretches almost 45 feet across. The transom is 7 feet across and 11 inches high. Here's the colors. These are just our signature colors for Frick Madison. And for the purpose of the elements here, it's really just an orange and a white, the orange for the transom and the white for the larger vinyl. Also note that it's just typical vinyl. It's only 1/32 of an inch deep, easily removable when the time comes. It was installed by Top Notch Graphics. They're already sort of contracted to remove it when the time comes. It should cause, expectedly, it will cause no damage to the windows. And we'll just want to point out here that we recognize that vinyl graphics are subject to weathering. These are sort of benefit from the overhang of the building. So they're somewhat protected, but at some point we may need to replace them. And that process is fairly quick. And we're hoping to keep these till the end of our lease on August 11th, 2023. Thanks again.
Hey, any questions, commissioners? All right, let's see if we have any speakers. We have someone signed up to speak remotely, but first I'll check. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? Okay, so we're going to move to our remote participants, and I'll turn it over to Anthony to take us through those speakers.
So we do have a sign up for this item, and the first person that I'll bring in is Lara from Friends of the Upper East Side. Lara, you should be in the meeting. You just have to unmute your microphone, turn on your camera if you wish to, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Perfect, thank you. Chair Carol, Laura Variali, representing Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Chair Carol and honorable commissioners. We're pleased to see this iconic Breuer building housing yet another Upper East Side institution. Friends Preservation Committee is not opposed to the sign, and notwithstanding the lengthy duration of the proposed signage, we believe it to be appropriate for both the building style and function. Thank you.
Thank you. We do not have any other signups for this item, and I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, commissioners, any final comments or questions? All right, so why don't we make a motion to close the hearing? Manhattan Community Board 8 approved the application as presented. All right, let's have a motion to close the hearing. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
Make a motion to close. I second that.
Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so this is an application for these temporary signs. The staff has already approved them for the period of time that the staff is allowed to approve a temporary installation, and they're coming to seek approval for 2 more years. Commissioner Lutfi?
I think this is a terrific sign. I mean, it just, building strong, it makes a strong statement, and, you know, the building can take it. And it's certainly, and it does what it needs to do for the Frick. It says, we are here, and for people who don't know, they now will. It's very attractive. I can approve it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
The proposal and reasoning is sound and appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson?
It's appropriate just the way it is. The only question we have is, the length of time it has to remain in place, but the way construction is going these days, they may be coming back to us in August of 2023.
Okay. Commissioner Holford Smith? I think it's appropriate. And Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree. I just thought it was interesting that they went with they had a choice, they could have gone with the font that represents the institution or the font that represents the building. They went with the latter. I thought that was an interesting choice.
Interesting. Commissioner Devonshire?
I think it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make the motion?
I do want to say one thing. Very, very incredible designer, Michael Beirut. So not surprising that he made a very smart design decision. Okay, in the matter of docket LPC 21-10-010-833, 945 Madison, Upper East Side Historic District, the Modern Style Museum, building designed by Marcel Breuer and Associates and built in 1964 to 1966. The application is to install signage. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed installation is temporary and reversible, that the existing installation has not caused damage to significant architectural features of the building, that an acceptable plan for removal of the signs has been submitted to the commission, and that the signage will be in place only for the duration of the Frick's tenancy at the building during construction at their permanent location, and that the proposed work is consistent with similar temporary installations approved of other cultural institutions and will not detract from the special historic and architectural character of the building or the Upper East Side Historic District.
All right, and Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
I second that motion.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum. Aye. Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
So that's approved, and we'll move to the next item.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is item number 11, LPC 20-08873, application for certificate of appropriateness, the Borough of Queens, block 8049, lot 25, 356 Hollywood Avenue in the Douglaston Historic District. An English cottage style freestanding house designed by Philip Resnick and built in 1930. The application is to legalize the replacement of windows, alterations to planters, and installation of steps in non-compliance or without LPC permits. And the staff will be going through the slides for this one.
Okay, thanks. And just commissioners, just so you know, this is actually, I think there was a Xerox issue. So in your packet, it's on page 12. It's listed as item 12. So just item 11 and item 12 got reversed. Okay.
Bernadette, are you able to begin? Just 1 minute to try to ask her to unmute. Oh, she's here in person. Bernadette is here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Bernadette, Preservation Department staff. This is an application for 356 Hollywood Avenue in the Douglas. So this is an application for 356 Hollywood Avenue in the Douglas Historic District. The proposal is to legalize the replacement of windows and doors, as well as for the installation of paving, replacement of steps, and replacement of construction of a planter. The application, the windows and the doors, a permit was issued for the windows and the door, which I will explain further. The paving, steps, and the planter were installed without permits. To go through the windows, back in 2011, the staff of the commission issued a permit for work that included replacement of windows and the door. The permit included errors in it. The windows that you see, the front facade, on the ground floor, and the side facade with leaded glass windows. In the text of the permit, they were described as multi-light windows similar to other windows in the facade and were to be replaced with other multi-light windows. That does not meet the rules. The staff rules only allow for us to install new leaded glass windows. Throughout the remainder of the building, the permit specified multi-light window replacement, and the windows that were installed largely match what that permit showed, but those windows also did not comply with the rules. Specifically, the components for both the front and the side facades include that the windows are metal-clad wood rather than just wood. The windows do not have exterior munching grids on them. The rules would require that, and this would be, and the windows are a white painted finish. So under the rules, they should have a darker finish. Unlike other historic districts, this applies to the side facade as well as the front. In other historic districts, the side facade windows would comply with the rules with the exception of finish. But the Douglaston Historic District is regulated by the master plan for that district, and that requires the same standard for the side facade windows as the front facade windows.
Edith, could you try advancing the slides? I'm not sure if it's a delay or a podium computer problem.
Sure. I'll take that control and I'll run the slide. So just say next slide when you're ready, Bernadette.
In this photo at the bottom, you'll see the leaded glass windows.
Sorry, Bernadette, we're not
Just make
having
sure the
trouble
speaking
hearing you on
correct.
Zoom.
These are close up of the windows on the front facade, the leaded glass ones. this is a slide you don't have to pay attention to. This is actually the rear of the building. These are the historic leaded glass windows that are the side facade. So there's one bay of windows at the front facade that had the leaded glass windows, and this is the one bay of leaded glass windows at the side facade. Next slide, please. Keep going. Next slide. This is the side facade you're seeing at this is taken from the property looking out towards the street, and you're seeing a little bit of that the leaded glass window. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There is also included in that permit the replacement of the door. The historic door was for staff level rules, the staff are allowed to replace the historic door in kind only. The permit was not clear about what the door was going to be replaced with. Next slide, please. That's the historic door again. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is the door that it was replaced with. So this is the current door that was installed. Next slide, please. This shows not only the door, but you're seeing the steps that were replaced for that permit. The previous steps were just concrete steps. Also, you're seeing a little bit of paving to the right that was added and the planter to the left. Next slide, please. Again, you're seeing the paving to the right and the planter to the left. The Douglaston master plan has no specific rules for planters. Paving is is that it should match the existing or historic condition or style in terms of material details, finish, and design, or be compatible with materials traditionally found throughout the district. So that's the requirement for the steps. Next slide, please. Steps. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And here you see the planter on the left that was installed without permit, the steps that were replaced, and the paving at the right that was added with that permit. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. These are photos of the side facade. They are visible at an angle from the street. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, these are the photos of the rear. The rear is not visible from the street. These windows comply with staff level rules. So I realize we're seeing a modern rear extension, but that is not part of this proposal. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Side facade. In the left-hand photo at the very left side, you see the window that replaced the leaded glass windows on the side facade. Next slide, please. And there you see it again on the left. Next, but keep in mind this photo is taken from the property. This is not taken from the street. Next slide, please. 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 There's just site work that we need to get to. So any of these shots in the rear, we can just keep going past them.
So Bernadette, just are all of the windows in well, we approved aluminum clad windows, multi-light windows with a white finish, which didn't meet the rules. And the windows that were installed conform to what we approved that didn't meet the rules?
They largely match what was approved on the drawings. The ground floor windows in the front facade, there is a difference between what was shown on the drawings and what was actually installed, but it didn't make those windows any worse.
All right.
Okay, and this is the sidewalk. This historic district historically had a beige tinted concrete sidewalk paving, so that's the type of paving we can approve at staff level in this district. The paving that was installed without a permit is lighter, and then it was coated, and then they removed some of the coating, but not yet been able to get all the coating off, so they're asking to legalize this as it is. But you see the darker paving further on the upper photo of the beach. So that would be the other component. So it's the replacement of the windows and the door. Both of those were under a permit but did not comply with the rules. The other work is the paving at the driveway and the sidewalk, the construction of the planter, the replacement of the steps, and the new portion of paving to the right of the steps, and that is the work without permits. The owner is here. I would like to see.
Okay, so please go ahead and state your name before you speak.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tony. Actually, I'm the owner of the property. I know the LPC agent, the vendor was just spoke about the house condition, whatever we're facing. So I would like to talk about the fact, from the beginning time, we move in the house. First of all, she mentioned about the planter and also the steps. We didn't have the difficult situation, when we moved in back 2009, because the steps over there, whatever the landmark, before the 1997, they don't have any picture shows the steps how it looks like. So there is no certain rules, based on the house condition, that the landmark provision, the records. And then after that, when we moved in by 2009. And then I did a replacement because the status wasn't workable. And then I using the like the ghost and the color granite for the step over there. And then before the house renovation, then my daughter, my 3-year-old daughter, was falling down, from the steps right there to the planter area, which is you can see it, the highest point, close to 3 feet. She got the hurt, and then after that, I decided to make the whatever steps bigger, and then it cannot be like polishing the granite, gold and color like before. So that's why right now the 2 steps we are making it, which is. We believe it's physically match the house exactly in its total condition, and then that's why I'm using the dark color, the triple wood jet finish. So the safety concern, so that's why I build the planter down there, and I make out the more, the topsoil down there. So instead of other people falling down there, that's for the things for over there. And then by the 2011, the house was in a horrible condition. We tried to remodel the entire house, and then most of the windows doesn't work. And then we submit the document to landmark. Basically, to the end, we got a permit, and then we submit all the detailed document from the panel window, whatever the manufacturer is, with the architectural plan approved by DOB at the same time, submitted to the landmark. We indicate every single detail, from the whatever before the panel window, we all put the order in for each window match whatever the existing plan is. Because the vendor didn't mention about whatever plan we can submit to the landmark provision. So by June 23rd, 2011, we got a landmark, the chairs on the permit for all the window replacement. based on the detail we submit to the landmark. And there's the front facade, like the left side picture, that's the most thing I'm concerned about it. Because when we submit the document, the DOB approved the drawing from the architect. Also, with the panel window, the detail, which is a match whatever we submit to the landmark. We've got to perforate, we got to approve it from the landmark. But in the world ratings, the landmark agency say the front glass, each panel got to be the casement 15 glasses instead of the whatever we did for 8 glasses. But on the perforated drawing, which is approved, and also the architect drawing was approved also by landmark, which is the front is whatever the panel submitted. And this things is after 2 years later, because we got the job entirely somehow by landmark by October 11, 2012, which is 1 year after, we submitted, we had a landmark permit. And then the staff letter, which is the staff letter, look at very detailedly, which is, they got no indication, any, whatever actual work all the way should be done. So this one, I'm just trying to add this things. This is the first time in my life, attending to the public hearing. So this is some of letter from landmark. Everybody can see it. So I can draw here, probably let everybody look at, But to the end, by 2014, which is the 2 years after, it surprised me, when I checked out the internet, I found out one letter for the front 3 facade windows. They said, oh, you got a warning letter. I don't want my house got some record on there. And then, from there, I've been in contact with the landmark back and forth, and then it is, changing. Think about it. It's like 7 years now. I've been dealing with this back and forth. Sometimes, the agency, take like 3 or 2 months, minimum 2 or 3 months to answer my email back. So I've been frustrated, for this kind of situation. And then I said, okay, this way. I submit the new window based on whatever the landmark, the previously indicated for 50 panels, square panels, casement window in the front 3 windows. No one you give me an answer back. I already got a quotation. And then, I submit at least like 4 or 5 times for this kind of window. I'm trying to go in to use it, which is trying to follow the landmark provision. Whatever the landmark district, the window is supposed to be using it. No one give me an answer. And then we talk about, the front door. Before, probably, the guy was standing next to the door, take the picture. That's before the renovation we start. I had a very clearly, the clear conversation and video sending to the landmark the appeal time, talking to the agency who issued the permit. Very clear. Over there, the small glass is not lead down there. It's a very thick silver glue down there. I use my finger, scratch it out, and then everybody say that's the lead. Who can prove that? Is similar like everybody talk about it, the stats. You did not do the right. Okay, what's the staff level? If the landmark have the particular right, how we can build up by the homeowner, how we can build that. I asked at least over 3 years about these things. Even since 2014. I was submitted so many things. People ask for bluestone, you got to using the different material. No one give me a final answer. I said I can knock down things, another contract doing it, replace it, no problem. Okay, the front window, I even gave the submittal to everybody. Okay, and then we talk about the sidewalk, which is just mentioned about it. remember, there's a lot of trees over there. We got the two trees going up, and then the sidewalk is close up, almost like 4 inches higher, different. And then called the tripping hazard. We saw the kids, and then we saw the woman walking past by. They're falling down there. And then my wife even, come here also. She went outside the house. She asked the people, "Do you got serious injury?" People, they are nice over there. They don't sue us. Emergency condition, people do the construction, and they say, "Okay, do it." Just make sure that the site is safe for public. I know everybody care about the landmark district. I care about life. After we replaced the sidewalk, and then I got a warning letter from the landmark last year. Because it's really almost like a 4-inch tripping hazard. I have the picture, but it's not here, Charles. That's how I replaced the sidewalk. And then to the end, I've been told the landmark district, the concrete got to be winter beige. Okay, no problem. I follow the rule. I got a contract, both the winter beige color concrete paint from Home Depot went to my house, paint everything. And then what? They said your color is not right. I have emailed them. So who can tell me as the homeowner? I know everybody is not easy. But why I have to go through such difficult time if the mistake issued by landmark? I'm trying to coordinate with everybody, but nobody coordinated with me. Always give me a hard time. Oh, the trailer is wrong. Tell me what's wrong there. If you have kids, working outside, of the stairs, which is facing almost like 3 feet falling down, then called the tripping hazard. You be allowed things to happen there? It won't be. Rule is rule. We set out a rule, but we care about human beings. We care about life. I don't want anybody to get injured. That's the major concern I have in my heart. Similarly, I have one of the company, which is a construction company. I told all my project managers, one thing, I want every old workers coming to work, happy, healthy. I want their happy, healthy work back. I care about lives. That's what I do. So if everybody think about, whatever the commissioner knows, you guys think about it, I have to replace the 3 windows? No problem. I do so. You want me to change the size? Give me the detail. I do the 5 times submit, nobody get the answer. I want to come on the solid, whatever answer from you guys. You guys are decision maker. Give me the direction, please. That's what I request for. Okay. I'm done with it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for your comments. And I'm sorry that this has been a very frustrating experience for you. And as has been noted, you did get a permit for the windows. Oh, please, we're not done yet for the windows. And it's very unfortunate. It appears that we incorrectly approved those windows. And the other work we need to address now because it didn't have a permit. I also want to just note for the record that the sign off that was submitted was for interior alterations, not for the window permit. So just to note that for the record. Let's move to public testimony and then we can begin our discussion. Okay. You have Simeon Bankoff.
Commissioners, Simeon Bankoff, Historic Districts Council. Terribly sorry when the sort of situation happens. It's always painful for everybody involved. However, we strongly oppose this application. The front stoop is barely designed. It's just put there regardless of any historic precedent or aesthetics. Although it's difficult to determine from the presentation materials, we understand that there's a whole conversation about the windows. I won't revisit it, but I was alerted by people in the community that they were really nice windows that originally, and this is the sort of thing which, and this is no fault of the applicant, but he must understand that historic districts are dependent on everybody following the same standards, because you will have situations where everybody's got their own situation going on, and they're going to say, well, why can't I do what that guy did and just do it? And then you have historic districts falling apart, and then you have, you know, people putting signs all over Fifth Avenue buildings all the time. I mean, there are such things as precedent, and they become self-regulating. So we urge LPC to work with this applicant to return the building towards a more historically appropriate appearance using the proper designs and materials.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this application? And if there's anyone participating remotely through Zoom, if you would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand. Okay. All right, thank you. So it doesn't seem we have any speakers participating remotely. And I'll just note for the record that Queens Community Board 11 waived their review of this application. Okay, so thank you very much for your comments. I think we'll just close the hearing and move to our discussion. Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing? So moved. Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we're going to begin our discussion. You know, we have an amazing staff here at the commission, and unfortunately, on the rare occasion, mistakes happen, and it's very, very unfortunate, as was said on all parts. But I do want to recognize that you got a permit for the windows and that they are largely in compliance with the permit. The staff approved windows that didn't meet the rules. So now, because they don't meet the rules, we as a commission have to review them and act on them. And then the new steps, retaining wall and the sidewalk, I understand you did for safety reasons, and that's great. We work very closely with owners to make sure that sidewalks and steps are safe, and we approve changes for that. And unfortunately, you didn't come to us for those. So we're going to have to address those. We had worked together. We may have been able to come up with a staff level solution, but as it is, they don't meet the rules. And so the commission will have to review those as well. So we have windows that do not match the historic windows in terms of the configuration and finish and material. Most of those windows are obliquely visible and on the side facade, but there are the 3 windows on the front. And then I think that's right, Bernadette, right?
Floor windows don't meet the rules in terms of material, not having an exterior mounting grid, and the finish.
Okay, but on the front facade, is it all of the windows or just at the
All
first?
windows on
All
the
of the
front
windows, okay. As well as the side, but again, the side facades are obliquely visible. All right, and then we don't know what, and then we have the door, and then we don't know what the original steps were evidently, but do we?
We know that prior to the work being done, that there were 2 concrete looking steps. We have a photo before this time.
Concrete steps, okay. All right, so we have windows on the primary facade and secondary facades. We have the black granite steps and the planter adjacent to it, and then the paving, which has been has a coating on it, which the owner is working to remove to see if that helps blend with the other paving in the district. Gosh, who's going to be the lucky one to start this? Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you start this one?
Thanks. Well, this is unfortunate. So I'm just trying to understand it piece by piece. The windows should be a dark color. They should be the brown color. Is that what that would meet the rules? And they should have, and ideally they would be divided lights. So if we ask them to paint the windows and put exterior grids, would that bring them into alignment?
Okay.
And that doesn't seem too onerous. I mean, I think the planter is probably okay. The granite cladding on it is a little out of character. Maybe they had a different coping. The steps again, the presence of steps obviously are required. but I think the black finish is very jarring. So maybe they could replace the black with just a different color stone or simple concrete, which is what was there before.
Okay. All right.
And if they can try to get the coating off the concrete that's the driveway and the sidewalk.
All right.
Is that everything?
Okay. No, thanks. You can continue to talk to the staff. Commissioner Devonshire.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm actually okay with the planter. I agree with Ann that the windows should be painted an appropriate color and a grid should be added to the exterior. I have difficulty with the front steps, not only with the color, but the fact the way they're installed, it actually cantilevers out over the sidewalk, which is a dangerous situation, frankly. It is a tripping hazard for someone approaching the house. And so I think that needs to be redone with appropriate materials and in an appropriate style. I think the coating can be abrasively blasted from the sidewalk, and the concrete doesn't need a new coating, but there are actually companies that make appropriate stains for concrete. So they could perform some tests with different strengths of stains and restain that sidewalk so that it's appropriately colored.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Lefty.
Wholeheartedly agree with these recommendations.
Commissioner Jefferson.
I have very little to add to those recommendations.
Okay. And Commissioner Gustafson.
I agree with everything everyone said. I just want to be sure that when we take it from here, I mean, the one big point that we're hearing is that we need to give specific direction, right?
Right.
And that's what the applicant is asking us for. And that means not being vague about what, oh, you could do this, you could do that. We've got to be very, very specific about it. And he said he's willing to do what he's got to do, but we've got to be specific, right?
Yeah.
We can't, oh, well, this could be okay, that could be okay. That's not going to work.
Right.
So whoever it is on the staff who's working with them has got to really, dig in on this one and be specific so that he can do what it is he said he wants to do.
Agree completely. Okay. So if we can make a motion to approve with modifications to paint the windows and add an exterior munting grid, to legalize the planter, to replace the steps with a lighter stoner concrete in the right configuration, and to continue to remove the coating and explore a stain on the concrete.
In the matter of LPC 20-08873, 356 Hollywood Avenue, Douglaston Historic District. An English cottage-style freestanding house designed by Philip Resnick and built in 1930. Application is to legalize the replacement of windows, alterations to planters, and installation of steps in non-compliance or without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Douglaston Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the double-hung windows at the front facade match the historic windows in terms of configuration and operation, that the casement windows at the front facade match the historic windows in terms of operation and the proportion and size of the sashes, that the multi-light configuration of the casement windows at the front facade and the casement and double-hung windows at the side facades relate well to the style of the house in terms of configuration and support a unified fenestration pattern, that the material of the metal-clad wood windows, when seen from the sidewalk across the front yard, is indiscernible from wood windows, that the door matches the historic door in terms of material and finish and recalls the historic door in terms of design, that the step and landing at the entrance are compatible with the style of the house in terms of placement, size, materials, and finish, that the planter is simply designed and harmonious with the house in terms of its placement, size, materials, and finish, and that the paving matches typical historic driveway and sidewalk paving within the historic district in terms of material, and its finish blends well with the finish of the adjoining paving. However, I find that the simulated bunting grids between the glass without corresponding exterior grids at the front facade windows do not sufficiently recall the historic buntings in terms of profiles and details and detract from the character of the house. That the white finish of the windows and screen frames is not well integrated into the historic color palette of the building. That the black stone risers and edge cladding of the front stairs does not relate well to the style and color palette of the house. And that the remnants of the coating of the sidewalk detract from the streetscape. Therefore, I recommend that profiled exterior bunting grids be added to the front facade windows. That the windows and screen frames at the front and side facades be painted brown. That the steps, the risers and edge cladding be replaced with a different type of stone to better relate to the style of the house, and that the steps be reconfigured so that the leading edge of the step is in alignment with the sidewalks to eliminate a tripping hazard. And that the remainder of the coating of the paving be removed to the extent possible to more closely match the beige color used as sidewalks in this historic district. And the applicant work with the staff to look at a stain to make it match, help it match more the standard color.
Okay, and Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second.
And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 6 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that's we've approved it with some modifications, so please continue to work with Maggie and Bernadette, and they'll explain to you what the expectations are. Okay. Listen, we'll talk to you afterwards. We have to move ahead with our agenda, so our general counsel can also come out and speak to you.
Okay, we're going to make a minor schedule change to swap the last two items. We'll go to item 13. This is LPC 22-01527, an application for a certificate of appropriateness and the Borough of Staten Island, Block 22, Lot 120, 2 St. Mark's Place in the St. George New Brighton Historic District. It's a neo-colonial style freestanding house designed by Gardner and Hoffman, built in 1926 to 28. The application is to legalize replacement to legalize the alterations to the stoop and construction of retaining walls without LPC permits. This was previously advertised to also legalize garage door replacement, but that was since determined to be eligible for a staff level permit.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Elizabeth Diker, Preservation Staff. The item before you is 2 St. Mark's Place in the St. George New Brighton Historic District, and the application, as Corey mentioned, is to legalize alterations to the front stoop and the modification of concrete retaining walls in the areaway. Here we can see some existing conditions of the St. Mark's Place facade and the Westervelt Avenue facade. The subject property is a corner building in the St. George New Brighton Historic District with frontage on Westervelt Avenue and St. Mark's Place. On the left, we can see the 1940s tax photograph for this building, and on the right, we can see the designation photograph from 1994 to give you an idea of the historic recordation we have for this property. As Corey mentioned, the garage doors will be able to legalize at staff level, so I'm going to skip past them. Just working with a slight lag, as you know. Great. So here we can see conditions before and after the front entry stairs were altered through the removal of the top course of decorative masonry at the landings and treads, the installation of cast stone treads at the landings and treads, and the replacement of black finish metal railings with the new black finish metal railings. Again, based on historic recordation, we don't know if the railings on the left were the historic, but they were there at the time of designation. Here we can see additional photographs of the entry stairs. The lower metal gate has been removed. So now we turn our attention to the areaway alterations fronting Westervelt Avenue made without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits. On the left, we can see historic conditions of the Westervelt Avenue areaway, including rubble stone retaining walls fronting the street. Please note that the street-facing retaining wall returns towards the building, and the inboard retaining wall does not rise above the height of the rubble stone retaining wall at the street. So you can see the rubble stone retaining wall at the street, the dirt, and then nothing else behind it. So here on the right, we can see that those inner retaining walls were extended upwards and also coated in a cementitious stucco. I have some additional photos of that, which we will see next. So here we can see those inner retaining walls, which now extend above the dirt level and above the historic rubble stone wall. We can see the height of the historic rubble stone wall at the return, and those have been extended at the rear. You could also see that at that return, there are these loose concrete blocks, and then this one concrete block at the corner is cemented in place, attached. Moving forward now. Here's an additional photo of those semi-attached and semi-loose concrete blocks at the rubble stone retaining wall fronting Westervelt. And now on this last slide, I'll just show you the visibility of those features. So the extended inner retaining walls are really minimally visible here at the corner, but they're largely blocked from the street by mature hedges. But you are able to see those sort of concrete slabs, as I mentioned. And that is the extent of the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, we have one speaker signed up, Simeon Bankoff. All right, no longer here. Okay, and if there are any members of the public participating in Zoom, please raise your hand. Okay, so we have no speakers on this application. And if there are no final questions for Liz, we'll go ahead and close the hearing. Commissioner Leffler, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
I second the motion.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed. And
Community board comment on the legalization? Or
sorry, I don't have, it wasn't given to me, so I keep forgetting to look for it.
They might have forgotten as well.
So hang on. Let me. Thank you, John, for reminding me. Okay. Community Board, Staten Island Community Board 1 approved the application as presented. Okay, so it's for changes to with the cast stone treads on the stoops, the fencing, and the sort of concrete blocks on top of the retaining wall. All right, so Commissioner Gustafson.
Where to begin? First of all, just for, happens to be the neighborhood I grew up in, and I see this house about 2 or 3 times a week. The house is not typical of the houses that are in this district. Most of the houses in this district are Victorian style homes, mostly Queen Anne's, et cetera, some high-end Queen Anne's. But nevertheless, it's within the district, we no longer have the excuse in this district that I was unaware of this, because the district was designated 26 years ago now, and everybody on the island knows that it's a historic district. So awareness is not a question. So it is disturbing, because there are a lot of people in the neighborhood who actually do comply and go to come to us and get approval. That said, the standard is always the same, which is, would we have approved this in the first instance? I'm comfortable with the metal railings and the posts for on the front porch there. I would have preferred to have kept the top course of those stairs. The cast stone is acceptable. When it comes to that retaining wall, though, I'm a little mystified as to what it's actually doing. I'm not sure that it's actually constructed in a manner, I'm pretty sure it's not constructed in a manner that's going to actually do what it's supposed to do. I think it has to, in one way or the other, I think whether it's for safety or it's for aesthetics, that's got to go. And they've got to get somebody in to figure out if there is an issue there that is supposed to be preventing from happening. They need to have somebody, a professional, come in and figure out how to solve it. Because that's not it, both aesthetically as well as structurally. I do, generally speaking, I'm a little disappointed because this homeowner has done wonders for this property. It really is, it's a very prominent corner, and they really love their landscaping, and it really truly is beautiful through all seasons. And so they're investing in it, and they're making it a contributor to the neighborhood. So it is a little disappointing, but I hope that in the future they will come to us first, because largely speaking, we're going to be helping them, not hurting them. So, but I think that wall has to be dealt with.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Helfrich-Smith.
I agree.
Okay, Commissioner Devonshire.
I agree with John's comments. I am somewhat dismayed that he's gone by this house twice a week and let this happen. Nevertheless, I agree with his solution for the remedial work.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
Yeah, could we just go to the before and after shots of the front? If anybody can.
There's a delay with the, moving the slides.
Yes, there's a slight delay, but I'm pulling us forward. Not experiencing much movement here.
Maybe, well, okay.
I mean, when I was, looking at the book, I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry. This, as John said, this was not one of the buildings that the district was designated for. And the after photos look very similar to what was there before in terms of the railings and the stair treads. And I guess I feel, and I feel like, for better or worse, they replaced it with what was there. So, so I can accept that. I completely agree about that concrete slab. It doesn't, I can't even fathom what it's doing, and aesthetically, it's just as out of place. I think it has to come down.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree with, excuse me, I agree with John mostly. The only issue I have is the brick pattern stairs that have a concrete piece on top of it, I think, if I remember correctly. And I don't know why they did that. I mean, why not just patch the brick? But I can accept that.
I don't know, and they're not participating today. So.
But I can.
Okay.
It looks fine. All
right. All right. So, John, would you go ahead and make a motion?
In the matter of LPC 22-015272 St. Mark's Place in the St. George New Brighton Historic District, application is to legalize alterations to the stoop and the construction of retaining walls without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details among the features that contribute to the significant architectural and historic character of the St. George New Brighton Historic District. I recommend approval with one modification, that the metal railings and posts are simply designed and their material and finish are in keeping with railings found in similar buildings of the sage style and type. that the cast stone stair treads are in keeping with the texture and tone of the masonry found at the building and its retaining walls, and is consistent with similar installations found at other buildings in this historic district, that the inner areaway walls, which are extended and coated, are only minimally visible from West 12th Avenue, and the alterations did not damage or eliminate significant architectural fabric. However, I find that the concrete slabs installed above the rubble stone portions of the areaway walls are poorly installed, loose, and detract from the special architectural features of the building. And I therefore recommend that the concrete slabs installed on top of the rubble stone portions of the areaway walls be removed, and if necessary, replaced with appropriate engineered walls.
Okay, and Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 6 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so it's approved with that modification and they should continue to work with the staff. Commissioners, we have one last item. I promise it's quick if you all can stick with it for 5, since you're here this late, if we could stick it out 5 more minutes. No, it's item number Item number 12, it's in your packet, it's identified as 11.
And I do think the comments are a little out of order for this one, but thanks for your stamina. And yes, we'll move back to item 12 for the last item. LPC 21-10070, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Staten Island, block 1015, lot 9, 121 Heberton Avenue, the 121 Heberton Avenue house individual landmark. A rustic style freestanding house designed by James G. Berger and built in 1859 to 61. The application is to install a parking pad and pergola. The pergola was since removed from the proposal, so it's just to review the parking pad.
Hi, Commissioners. Liz Diker one more time here at the end. We're at the individually landmarked 121 Heberton house on Staten Island, and the application has been reduced to just installing a parking pad. Here we can see existing conditions of the front and one of the side facades. Here we can see the other side facade fronting Bennett Street. Here we've got a site plan. The area denoted in red is where the proposed work will be. Here we can see a portion of the rear yard which won't be impacted by this work. A lot of green space. Here we can see the side yard. Again, no impact on this space. And here's the portion of the rear yard which will be converted to a parking pad using grasscrete paving. You can see the ground is unleveled. There are no mature landscaping features, and it's currently used for parking. So this area is mostly blocked from the street by this opaque wood fence, which will be repaired as needed but not replaced in any way. And here's a proposal. So it's going to be grasscrete paving with a perimeter planting strip along the fence line fronting their neighbor on Bennett Street. And here we can see that the proposal is to use grasscrete, a permeable paving material, and to keep a planting strip. That's it. That's the proposal. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So it's at the rear of the side yard, and it's currently used as for parking, so it's dirt and it isn't very planted now. And it's behind the fence, which will remain. And we don't have any speakers signed up. And Anthony, I don't know if you can tell if there's anyone in the meeting. Okay. All right, and we do have a resolution from the community board recommending approval, and I think a written letter from HDC objecting to the stone. I guess I'm not, perhaps they didn't understand that it was grasscrete and the intention. So let's have a motion to close the hearing. Commissioner Devonshire.
So moved.
And Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing's closed. Commissioner Lutfi? Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
I think it's a great idea.
Okay, great.
Got to take a second here. This is an incredibly beautiful little house.
Yeah.
And they take such great care of it, and it's an individual landmark. So when you look at this neighborhood, it could have been an historic district. And if we'd done it 25, 30 years ago, there would have been 35, 40 houses you would have loved to have saved. And a lot of them have declined dramatically. But it is, I think we have a library down the street that's designated and we've actually seen, but it's a really, really cool neighborhood that you have to walk through. And this one is just a gem. So I'm glad they're doing this. And I think it's perfectly appropriate. And well, I'd love to, I wish they were coming. I would have loved to have met these people.
Would you like to do the honors? Very appropriate. Okay. Michael?
Such a cool house, and this is just a perfect solution to that problem.
Great. Good, I think we all agree. Would you like to read?
I'd love to. Come on, you called Staten Island and nobody was home. In the matter of LPC 21-10070, 121 Heberton Avenue, an individual, 121 Heberton Avenue house. Individual landmark application is to install a parking pad and pergola. I recommend approval, finding that the work will not eliminate any significant architectural or historic features of the house or site, that the parking pad will utilize open weave grasscrete paving, which will preserve the appearance of a lawn and is permeable and reversible, that the design includes a planting strip along the southern fence line, which will remain unpaved, that the parking pad will be obscured by an existing wood picket fence, and that the work will not result in a significant loss of green space at the site or detract from the special architectural or historic character of the individual landmark.
All right, and Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion? Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Hilbert Smith.
Aye.
6 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
All right, that's approved. And thank you, commissioners, for sticking it out this very long day. We had a lot of items, a number of large items that took some time, and in working on this new hybrid model. Obviously, there were some technical, I guess it was really delays, maybe having to do more with the Wi-Fi. But we appreciate your